All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, rather, depending on where you are in the country. If you're on the West Coast, it is afternoon still,
Yes.
a little bit. But good evening. I'm your host, Zakia Sankara Jabbar. And as you know, this is Real Talk with ZSJ. You all know that we always try to bring the highest caliber of information and content to you on this page. It's content that you will not get normally in I would say kind of like mainstream popular culture kind of spaces and things like that. And so my whole role with like starting this podcast and this channel was to give African Americans specifically access to information that I believe is critical into how we advance as a race and as a community. And I think we have to understand all the intricacies of the different challenges and also victories, right, that we are faced with. So, without further ado, I want to introduce to you Dr. Shantella Sherman. She is an amazing historian. Obviously, she's a PhD. She studies eugenics, right? Like that's something that we don't necessarily talk about in popular culture. And so she's gonna, just go in and share about the work that she's been doing to get this word out at a grassroots level. I actually met Dr. Shantella Sherman a couple of years ago through our mutual friend, Brother Jeff Kennedy. And he was like, Zakia, you have to come. Oh, I'm telling you, this information, you need access to it. And I'm going to be honest with you, the only time I heard of eugenics was through a documentary that had came out several years ago now. I think it came out like in 2011 or something called My Alpha. And that was the first time I heard the word eugenics. I remember I went researching like, what is this? And then my mouth was just open the whole time when I realized, who all was connected in it and all of this stuff. Anyway, y'all ain't come to hear me. Dr. Sherman, tell the people a little bit more about yourself. Anything that I left out about you, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to see you. I'm always happy to join you and always pleased to talk about eugenics and try and explain it, not in the terms of scientific racism, but the way that we interact with eugenics on a day-to-day basis, whether it's through housing, through education, through popular culture, through economics and finance. It's all there because it's woven into our culture. It's woven into the very fabric of America. So sometimes when we say racism, what we're actually saying is it's a eugenic construct, and we don't necessarily know the difference. And it's one of the reasons why when we try and fight things like standardized tests or housing policies, redlining, you're not quite clear on why these laws keep coming back up. But a lot of this is based on an old construct of eugenics, which technically I'll give you the official definition. This is an agrarian science that really wasn't a science, that basically said, as in agriculture, if you can take the best types of crops or the best types of animals and pair them together, you end up with a different type of stock. And it was believed that you could have, like you have the best cows and the best squash or whatever, you can breed the best people. But in order to do that, and this is long before we started studying DNA and genetics, we're talking 1830s, 1840s. What you did have access to were Black bodies. And so what you start out by saying is Africa is a dysgenic, degenerative, savage place, and Europe is a wonderful place. And just by doing that, you start the tenant. So you have a racial component to this. But then within that construct, you're looking for the best possible bodies, the best possible genes within those particular groups. And so you literally start having Black people on plantations. The goal years ago, if you find the book Birthing a Slave, I'm going to throw out some titles of different books. You can always email me or get in contact with Zakia, and these titles will be available to you so that you can go back and reference them. But the book Birthing a Slave talks about the fact that the goal was to have any girl, once she started her cycle, to give birth twice a year if possible. So if she was pregnant in January and gave birth by September, October, they wanted her pregnant again before that year was over. And the goal was to get her reproducing because her reproduction, as well as her production in the fields and her actual body production, that was the currency. That is absolutely the currency of the nation. And so what you start to have are people who are basically looking at Black women's bodies, trying to determine how can we get this particular type of male and this particular type of female together to breed the best possible super cotton picker, or a slave that will be able to breed a certain type of way. So women with wider hips or bigger breasts so that they can nurse white babies as well as Black babies. All of this kind of went into this. And so when we get to people like Jay Sims, who's running around, he's the father of gynecology. Basically what he was doing was taking enslaved women and experimenting on their bodies. And within that, you have something like themes that say, as African people, they're more savage than human. They're more animal than they are human, which means they don't feel pain. So there's no need to give these women anesthesia. This is something that we deal with currently. Whenever you go to a dentist or someplace else, the dentist will ask you, can you still feel this? And more often than not, if you're a Black person, you say, yes, I can still feel this. The belief is you don't need as much anesthesia because something in your genes, in your genealogy, in your DNA makes you more animal than human, and you can take the pain.
Wow. And you just reminded me of something. I have chronic lower back pain. And I can remember not being believed when I went to the ER before about how bad my pain was. And I remember being given a prescription, and I took the medicine and everything, but I'm like, this ain't doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? And didn't realize that they could have given me something stronger, but they didn't. I literally had to suffer like a few more hours. And then when the nurse came back in to check on me, I was telling her, I said, whatever you gave me felt like a placebo. I went through that birthing my second child as well. So yes. This is real. This is not like the past. My second child is 6 years old. Exactly. That happened 6 years ago. Yeah. And I have to be honest with you, these were all white healthcare providers. Yeah. I've never had that issue with a Black healthcare provider.
Yeah, and again, it's all in the matrix of the medical profession, because anything that's medical, up to a certain point, you're using cadavers, you're using Black women, and in some instances, if you had to find a white person, you're using the degenerates of the white society. So prostitutes, those who are in asylums, anyone who's in a home for the feeble-minded. You have a vulnerable set of bodies. In some instances, it's men in the military. Okay. And so you literally have to pull back. If the nation is trying to find the best possible American stock, it's already been determined that Black people don't make the grade. Okay. So at that point, Black people have to determine, once we're emancipated and we're dealing with science, which ones of us make the grade within the race. And so we adapted and adopted many of these themes and theories.
Sadly.
Right. And anywhere you go where white supremacy, and I always say, I don't like the term white supremacy because it's really white inferiority. And we need to change that, because it's not about being superior or supreme. It's about really understanding that your genes are a recessive type, and that everything you do is based upon believing that you're being bred out. All right. And so you really have to read the language of eugenics.
That's what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said.
Exactly. You have to look at your leaders, whether it's Theodore Roosevelt, talking about, we have to make sure that our men, because they're becoming too effeminized, and what you're having are these big Spanish men and Native American men who are showing themselves as very manly, and African men, Black men who are coming around. And these white women, if they have a choice, they're not going to choose you. Okay. And so I always make the point, when we start talking about the building of asylums, the building of feeble-minded homes, to literally take people who are not fitting into the norm of what America believes is normal and beautiful, and sanctity of, this is what the body looks like, and this is the behavior that you're supposed to have. These places were filled with white people. These were white people who acted too much like Black people. You understand? So a lot of times white people won't talk about that. But I always say, in going to Lincoln, Nebraska was one of the most eye-opening and amazing things that ever happened in my life. And I love, go Big Red, go Huskers. I love the space, because as a historian, you look at the fact that at the erection of the state, okay, the establishment of the state, you have three entities: the state government, state capital. The second is the university, and the third is a home for the feeble-minded. So you think there's nobody out there. Who in the world are you building a home for the feeble-minded for? But you had a lot of German immigrants. And these German immigrants didn't go by the rules and regulations that normal, quote unquote, white people did. They interacted with Black people, all right? Large mixed race group of people there. That was problematic. They drank a lot, and the women had money. So you weren't going to have men being in charge and women staying at home to reproduce the nation. They were out doing what they wanted to do, and that wasn't going to work. And so they would literally put people into asylums or homes for the feeble-minded, meaning they were sexually charged and they were basically a threat to whiteness, to the American genome. There's a problem here. And so essentially, you put these people in a home for their reproductive life. So if a girl is put in there and she's 15 years old, they're not going to let her out until she's about
50.
to hit menopause.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. And the goal, again, was to ensure that she didn't reproduce her kind.
That's crazy. I wanted to share, I got your PowerPoint pulled up too, so I can navigate that whenever you want me to.
Okay. And basically, yeah, you can start going through this. Essentially, what I wanted to do with most people when I started doing these short courses, instead of approaching eugenics strictly from the scientific, I want you to understand that eugenics is it's all in the things that you watch every day. And we're at home, so we're streaming a lot. We're watching a lot of television. Netflix is going crazy. Everybody's losing their minds. And it's like, but what are you ingesting? What are you watching? And if you're watching things that aren't making you feel very positive, or you're saying, well, we want things with Black people in them, but the shows that you're watching, the Black people aren't necessarily on point. They're doing things that are making you kind of cringe, or they're making you angry, or you're like, why is this really buffoonish and silly? You know, and it's not just entertainment. And those are some of the things that we need to understand. So when we're looking right now, everybody wanted to do Ancestry.com and 23andMe and MyHeritage and all these other things. It's already been discovered. It's already understood. This is what the real Eve looked like. All right. So if you biblical scholars, they found the earliest possible female. This is what she looked like. Okay, that's it. So mitochondrial DNA, science has now caught up with everything else that they were trying to say wasn't true. And this is what you come up with. All right, this is it. All right. So now all of a sudden, everybody wants to look back at their genes and try and figure out what tribes they're from and what clans they're from and all of this. But the reality of it is, whether you ended up in Europe with a patch of folks that are there and with blonde hair, or in Australia or wherever else, this is what your mother, your original mother, looked like.
Wow.
All right. And so science already knows this. All right. So whether we're in London studying, genomes, and there's a whole eugenics clinic that's still there. Okay. This is what they're studying. So sometimes when you have Black people, where it's this constant thing about trying to get you, they want blood samples. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, right down here in Southwest DC, there was a line of people outside of an abandoned building. And the police came by and said, well, what are all these people out here? What are you doing? And they said, it's a guy in there who's giving away $40. He just wants to get some blood from people. And folks are
my God.
They're lined up around the corner, and he was paying people $40, two $20 bills. Come in here, let me get a blood sample from you. And he must have had a whole rack of blood samples. And I kept saying, they're trying to figure out chromosomally where Black people fit. They're trying to figure out how to create different drugs, how to create different treatments.
For $40, they taken our, see, that should be against the law. So these whoever this, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to dig into that for me, sister.
I think they're looking for another Henrietta Lacks. I think that when you start looking at Black bodies, this is not to sound sensationalist when I say this, but whether it's AIDS or different types of cancers or whatever it is, if a Black body is left alone and given time to heal, it usually heals. It usually finds an antibody for whatever it is. It knows how to replicate itself. And so it's something powerful in these genes that's kept us alive all this time. Under the duress, the stress, the mental fatigue, the poor diets, all of this other stuff. Most of us, the majority of us, shouldn't even be here. Okay. Yeah. So when you look at that, there's something else that's going on mentally, metaphysically, spiritually with these bodies and with these genes. So when you start getting people literally saying, I need blood samples, and he had vials of people's blood. He didn't need your name. All he needed was your age and your gender. That's all he was doing. He was separating male and female. The guy
He
was
was
arrested.
separating man and female, and he wanted age and gender, but they had to be black because he was in Southwest DC.
Exactly. And he was right down here at the end of the block where the stadium is. He was in the shadows of the stadium, right there with
And you
little.
had people just walking up because they wanted $40 to anybody
Someone has
stick
said,
something in there.
someone said they're giving $40 to people. What do they want for? They want a blood sample. And the line was literally around the corner.
Did the police shut him down?
The police came, shut him down. They arrested him. Is a Chinese guy. All right. They arrested him. They let him go, but he said he was doing it for a pharmaceutical. And in the court records, the pharmaceutical's name is never released.
Wow.
It's redacted out. And so there's something to that. So it's no accident when all of a sudden everybody wants to know their ancestry, and everyone's sending off swabs and spit and blood to people.
I never did it because I for something about it I never trusted. I've never done it.
Well, you know, a basic history lesson, I always tell people, you have to understand how slave ships work. All right. And so basically what you're getting are clusters of people who have the same blood type or gene system that you have. But this is how this works. The reason why they called it the East India Company, for instance, is because you started out in India. You're coming around. You stop off in China, pick up, you drop off. You stop off in all of Mozambique, you pick up, you drop off. You get down to South Africa and the Cape, you pick up, you drop off. There's a large population of Chinese people who are native to South Africa now. And I always say, if you ever look at Nelson Mandela's face, you see some of those features. Okay. You're picking up and drop. There's a large population of people from Mozambique originally who were off on that slave ship in South Africa. So if you tell me, oh, there's a large population of people here, you're from South Africa, your genes match, technically I could be from Mozambique. Wow. Technically I could be Asiatic and I can be up in another space. You understand what I'm saying? Wow. And so as you're starting to go through these, what I want folks to understand is that the idea that Black people were subhuman, that they were animal, and science books, you know, basically said, and there are a couple of slides in there to go to this, Black people are at the top of the monkey chain, the orangutan chain, and at the bottom of the human chain. Wow. And so based upon that, when you look at the laws, I want you to always go back to the law. You look at laws for miscegenation or race mixing, they list it as a crime against God because it's considered bestiality. Dang. One person is an animal. One is an animal and one is a person. So it's on the books as bestiality in many spaces.
I had never knew that either.
Right. You go. And so you can even look at our earliest movie. Oh, the Dred Scott case. Read the case. The Dred Scott case, it affirms, it says 1854. This person who's trying to gain his freedom cannot do so because based upon his African ancestry, he is a savage. He is a subhuman. It's in the actual leveling of that law. It's in the judgment. It's in the statement. This is a subhuman. This is a subspecies. These things were never meant to be a part of American society, of U.S. society. And so they can't sue. They can't serve on juries. They can't testify against white people. They cannot vote. You know, it's all of these things because of the fact that you are not fully human. And so it makes sense that as soon as you come out of enslavement, the one thing lithographically that folks are looking at in order to bridge their white community are ads and labels. And so what you find is that almost every label, I don't care if it was for honey or axle grease or peaches or whatever it was, it had a Black person's face on it. So your Aunt Jemima, your Uncle Moshe, your Uncle Ben, picking any sweets. These are all, you're trying to figure out, why would a white person want to eat something and it's saying pure honey and it has this little, this is a child. So the fact that you're, you know, showing children looking like savage animals, you know, it goes to that. So I don't know what this child is eating, but the idea is constantly being put into white people's minds that these are animals, these are savages, these are not people, they're not human. They are always diseased. They are always sexually corrupt, even as children, all right? And they are a danger. And that is when you look at the law, the police enforcement, when you're looking at schools, this is what you're going back to. All right, you can flip through. So we want to just make sure, you know, so we don't even have mass media at this point outside of ads and labels. So when you get some National Geographic, I think has been one of the biggest culprits in this type of exoticism. All right. We know that twins can come out very light, very dark. They don't even have to be twins. If you have parents, even if both of them basically,
Yeah, I seen it in my own family.
right. Even if you have parents who are the same complexion, through those genomes and a matching of those genes, you're gonna come out with children in the full spectrum. Some will be darker, some will be light, some will be in between. Some of them, the hair will be different, but that is the variety. The beauty of Black bodies is that you can do that. You have that variety. That's not a curse. That's a very good thing. But the fact is still looked at as exotic. And it's something that would be on the cover of National Geographic as a special issue to talk about Black and white. It's like, okay, did we just get here? Did we just get here? We've had people who were able to pass since we started mixing. All right. So we'll get into that. But I always do a little test. There's a little question I usually do when I do the live sessions when we're in person. And I would say, okay, between 1880 and 1890, 1 million people disappeared from the census. 1 million Black people. They disappeared from the census. They didn't die. They didn't immigrate, but they just disappeared. Can anyone tell me what happened to these people? They weren't killed. There was nothing like that. What happened to these people? Something very simple.
They just didn't count them.
Oh, no, they were counted. The problem was because of their complexion. Then when the next census came through, they just checked, the person looking at them said, oh, they're white instead of Black.
Oh, got it.
So
there's several people in my family who passed.
Okay.
Like great aunts and uncles.
Right. This is the importance of eugenics. That was the whole point of it. There's a whole system of measurements. So in order to get a marriage license, for instance, this young lady, the kid, this blonde in this picture, she would have been measured. They would have measured the width of her nose. They would have measured the ear holes. All total 122 different categories of her body that would have been measured from the top of her head to her feet. A piece of her hair would have been yanked from the back of her head, of the nape of her neck, to try and determine the curl pattern of it. Okay. And these are examinations that would basically say if it's kind of leery, we can't really differentiate whether she's a really light-skinned Black person or if she's a white person. To err on the side of caution, we're going to say that she's mulatto. She's and then it becomes, now you're cut off from everything else and you belong in this category over here.
Wow.
All right. And these measurements, I always like to let people know, Black people use these measurements for other Black people, and not just brown paper bag tests and things like that, but in determining what universities and schools you could come to. We had, Tuskegee had their own set of eugenic measurements that they use to teach eugenics. And what they call
oh my God, sister, you gonna hurt some feelings on here tonight. Y'all make sure y'all like this video and share it. This some top-notch information, y'all. Wow.
They were taught racial hygiene. There's certain courses that were being taught racial hygiene. And you could get eugenics classes that would be in home economics. You could get eugenic teaching that may have been in a biology class. Right, they crossed the color line, Jasmine. Right, you literally just crossed the color line. And again, the belief is that you had these hard delineations of segregation, and that's simply not the case. The more Black people became empowered, the more it was important to keep them separate. But you had Black people and white people living in these communities where they were literally crisscrossing each other all day long. Another very important thing to set aside is that if you are in the South was considered to be a very dysgenic place. It was considered to be contaminated. Why? Because you had white men who fathered children with enslaved women who were supposed to be animals. Okay? But they had a purpose and a point for those children. All right? So the children were part of the commercial enterprise that was going on. But all of a sudden, you get to emancipation. And all of a sudden, you look at these families that started out African Black. All right?
What was the purpose of the mulatto children, though, from the white slave masters who, I call it rape? I mean, some people can. I'm not going to sit up here and argue it was no damn love. That was a power relationship. She was a damn slave. So the white men who raped these African women and fathered mulatto children.
What was the purpose? It was currency. It was currency. Again, you know, pop culture does this thing where we romanticize the enslavement, you know, of people. It's Tara and Gone with the Wind, and there are 200 slaves. In the true history of America, you may have roughly 2% of all plantations that had more than 10 bodies on it.
Wow.
All right, that's it. So most of these places, when you look at them, you may have a man, a white man who has enslaved. He has one other man in the space with him, or he has a man and a woman there. And what he wants them to do is marry so they can have kids. If he gets a woman, he purchases a woman. What he wants to do is have children with her so that the children become
House servants.
right, or his currency. They got to go out there and pick something. There's no big plantation. It's a little patch of land. It looks like your backyard, darling. It's not. And that's what I said. These big, expansive places. You lived in the same house with this person. All right. So they were spaces of, you know, we say domestic intimacies. All right, where sometimes this was absolutely rape. Sometimes it was sex under duress. Sometimes it was we both just in here, so you know, nature takes its course. But the bottom line was, in all of these instances, these children were considered to be property. All right. And so then what you may want to do is have the woman that's on this patch of land have children with the man that's on another patch of land 2 farms down. And when I say farms, it's like having a house. So if you have a detached house and next door to you is somebody else, you can walk across the yard. That's the next farmhouse. These aren't big plantations. It's a patch of land. All right. So just understanding how close you are, you automatically start to understand there are other intricacies that are in here. Also, white men cannot vote unless they own property. Property isn't a house, baby. Property is you.
Damn.
So how interesting is it that
wow. Girl, I am so through right now. Cause I always thought when they, I mean, I knew like we were property, but I never knew like in that sense. Like I thought it was because like they owned the land or like the house that we were that our ancestors was working. But you're right, like they were counting us. Like we literally were, like you said, the currency. See, to me, and I don't mean to get off like on a tangent, but this anybody who is against reparations, I question their sanity. Because when you listen to this and you think about these were our ancestors, these are the people that we come from. Like, why would we be against something that is old to us? Their ancestors certainly are reaping the benefits of what happened back then.
Yeah.
That's called you hear it in when people say, oh, that's old money right there. Old money is slave money.
Slave money.
Shit. Go ahead, sister. I'm sorry.
Old money is slave money.
That's slave money.
Slave money. And so the whole thing is when you get to a point where you start to understand that, again, this white man, you have all these white planters, but if the planter doesn't have a slave, he doesn't have a property. All right. And as property, as currency, you are actual currency. What happens if there's a debt that's owed? I just wrote about this for some folks. Literally, it's 2 men gambling. They're rolling dice or playing cards. You lose. I don't have the money. I overextended myself. Okay, come to the farm tomorrow and you can pick one of the slaves that are there and take them with you. You're the currency. Now, it doesn't matter if that's a child and the mother and father are saying, you can't take my baby. Wow. These people are saying, you owe me money, and this kid is the money. That's the currency. At the same time, you were something that was passed along, so you were inherited. All right, I'm going to give you this watch. I'm going to give you this gold chain, this necklace, and this woman. All right. You were gifted to people during weddings. You understand? So if we're going to do that, and you understand, I always say it's reparations for me, because enslavement was so ridiculously complicated. All right, because you also had a lot of people on paper, because it was illegal for some of these it was illegal for white men to be married to black women. All right, sometimes you were being held as a slave, but this technically was a union. All right, and this man would take that money. I know the man would take that money at some point and send those kids elsewhere, because he wanted to ensure that they wouldn't get trapped in the enslavement. And if at any point he could not pay his debt, that those children would not be pulled into real, true slavery. Okay. So again, it's gray areas. It's things where we talk about it, but we don't talk about it. Do we talk about, and this is, again, it hurts, Black women You know, it's a whole book right now. It's called Jamaica Ladies, that talks about African women who came into Jamaica. They were there for a while. They gained their freedom, and they immediately began to purchase and own slaves themselves. And they were brutal.
Dang. No,
And they were brutal.
they were
Okay?
brutal.
And they were brutal. Okay. So it
Name the
didn't
book again so I can put it in the chat.
It's called Jamaica Ladies. And so, and again, it goes into this whole thing. Another great book talks about white women as slave holders. She owned the slaves. It's like, right, just don't let
They
white
were
women
her property. Now I know about that one. They were her property.
Right. So now you have the one Jamaica Ladies that's looking at the African women who had basically what they called the native elite. These were African women who had married Frenchmen, Spanishmen, British men while they were still in Africa. And the children they produced with them became what they called the native elite. You have to understand, if I don't know your language and you don't know mine, but we now have children together, those children know both languages. And they become the proxy in between the two nations. They set the price. All right. And as I said, there are a couple of complications in all of this. The documentary Enslaved, if you have not seen that yet, Samuel L. Jackson and his wife did an amazing job. It's a 6-part series, and they look at this and it's like, all right, we also have to deal with things like Black people in America. We got it rough. Please understand. I don't diminish it in any way, shape, fashion, or form. But I think roughly 6% of all of the Africans that were taken out of Africa made it to America. The rest of them, yes, ma'am, South America. They were in the Caribbean. They're in all these other places. And the 3 commodities that we're addicted to now that made us made it profitable to have slaves: coffee, chocolate,
Sugar.
and sugar.
Yep.
All right. And Black people at this point are addicted to all 3 because those Black substances like that weren't meant to be in our bodies at the rate that they were. And so they're talking about globally how the desire for this sugar, the addiction to the sugar, the coffee, and the chocolate is what spawned the need to have people chopping and growing and pulling and picking in the first place. And so it's some of these things that we have to look at. But again, going back to the whole eugenic stream of this, you know, in these spaces, you start to get Black people who are trying to determine who and what is considered to be good for the race. Who's a good race representative for Black people, you know? And it becomes, you know, folks that we champion and that we love, who are looking at things in a purely scientific way. I love, you know, the concept of W.E.B. Du Bois, but the things I've read don't make me his friend. And a lot of people will tell me, well, Doc, he changed his mind in later years. And yes, he did. But for about a 30-year period.
Yeah, he supported eugenics. I mean, the NAACP did, right?
Well, to some extent. But basically what you're talking about, again, you're talking the survival of the fittest. You're talking evolution. And so you have this concept that even within Africa and among Black people, survival of the fittest means that 10% of any population will automatically die out just because they're trifling. They're backward. Nature won't let them live. That's the way it's supposed to be scientifically. But if under slavery, even that 10% through successive generations is allowed to live because massa needed your labor. When emancipation comes, you have a whole group of Black people that are saying, now we are good. You know, we got good stock. But these other ones, they don't need to be here and they should have died off. They shouldn't be here. And so we can't afford as a race to carry them. All right. And so, again, it's not something popular. It's not something that we wish to talk about. But as time goes on, you'll start to see. I love Isabella Wilkerson, you know, the warmth of other suns. And I always say, if there's one thing that I felt was missing from that book, and it is an amazing work, the one thing that's missing from that story is the fact that of all of the millions of Black people that migrated out of the South to the North, there were at least 1 million more that went back home.
Right. That's right.
They left. And it was literally, it's the people, the other Black people are treating me like a dog. the other Black people are treated. And literally the idea that a Black person could mistreat you and treat you poorly. And we still do that now. You see a person dressed a certain way and you start making assessments on their character based upon how dark they are, how light they are, if their teeth are in order, what their hair looks like, how their clothing looks, what their posture looks like, how they walk, how they talk. And we do this even now. So I always ask people, if you're now in a space as a Black person where you're setting policy and a young girl comes in and she's talking a little louder than your folks do, and she got the purple and red and whatever cornrows and she's popping her gum, do you look at her differently? Or do you try and assess her capacity to do the job that she's there to do? All right.
Right. That's right.
All right. And so it's a hard lesson to learn, but that's why I say some things are racial and other things are racist. And we have to be able to learn the difference, because sometimes when it's racial, it's actually eugenic. And we all have this thing. Again, I make the point. You have children, you know, as a teenage girl, if you wanted to go out with somebody and you brought a guy home, or you wanted your parents to meet the person, there were certain criteria that your parents knew that maybe you didn't know. And the number of folks who say things like, you know, I brought this guy home, my parents took one look at him and they were like, nah, don't bring him back here. Nah. Wow. And it's like, okay, well, you know, what's wrong with him? I love him. He's great. He's wonderful. Nah. And sometimes they would say things like, I know his people.
Right, right. That's our tradition. Yeah.
That's a eugenic statement, baby. Just because just because the person's father or brother or whoever else may be tore up doesn't mean that genetically this child is also in line for that. Now, it could mean
I'm living proof of that, by the way.
Okay.
Your latter statement.
All right. Well, it is the thing. Some people
I would argue LeBron James to some extent is living proof. You know, because when I think about eugenics, as you know, LeBron James' mother was very young. You know, when she had him, and she wasn't on her feet. She wasn't, you know, able to do what she needed to do for a little while until she got herself together. And as you know, he lived with another family until she was able to get herself some support. And I think about like how people write off kids to mothers like that, to mothers like mine. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it literally comes down to, because Black people were considered to be at the very end of this spectrum of civility and fitness, there was no need to really save us. But if there was a Native American, for instance, you would have, we're getting to the talented 10th. That's exactly the point. You would have people that would say, we need to get the Indians, we need to take the ones who are mixed race, because white men were going all over the place. We want to take the ones that are the mixed race and put them into boarding schools. You had the same thing happen in Australia, all right, where you took the first people and all of these white men had babies with these women, left them there, and then you had someone literally come around and examine the kids, and they would do this test where they would tell the child to take their shirt off and look at their back. If their back or the backs of their ears were light, they would say, this child has enough whiteness in them that we can't leave them with these dirty, savage women. They're part of us. So they would take the children from the women and put them into missionary schools where they would beat the hell out of them, tell them they couldn't speak their native language. They're going to turn them into white people. All right. They're going to be educated. They can only speak English from this point on. You know, salute the flag, or, you know, hail to the queen and all this other stuff. And that's literally, you know, with Black people, like I said, to some extent, we started pulling those same stunts with Black people. So, you know, when we look at things like, again, later on, I'll get into Tuskegee. Again, if those of you who want to take the class, it's a reason why I do this as a course, because there's so many.
It's too much information.
Right. Exactly. There's so many tentacles.
Your website is absolutely in the description of this. Yeah. So can people sign up directly from the website for the class?
Absolutely. And it'll give you a breakdown.
It's in there.
Someone just mentioned the talented 10th. Again, this goes back to the whole idea again of, you know, 10% of the population was supposed to have died off. But what you need to do is actually read the Philadelphia Negro, 1904, when Du Bois wrote this. What he basically said was, 10% of the population that's worth something, they're going to look after not 90%, but 80%, because there's 10% that shouldn't be here anyway. Right? And that 10% that's not supposed to be there anyway, he's basically saying to some extent, let them die by benign neglect.
That's the Democratic Party policy for Black people since Moynihan report and before. So listen. I always have to bring in the politics.
And then when you bring in the Moynihan report, understand Moynihan was basically a thief. Daniel Moynihan stole that from who? You don't want to hear this?
E.E. Just. Come on. Let me hear it.
Come on, E.E. Just and Franklin. You know, it's a thing called the Chicago School. All right.
And you're talking about that Chicago School of Economics?
No, it's the Chicago School of Sociology. So between 1910 and 1940, you had all of these scholars that literally went through there, and they were studying Black people. These are Black people studying other Black people. And they're basically using Du Bois's theory. 10% of this population is not supposed to be here, and we can identify who they are. They're the ones coming up from the South who can't read. They have their father's dysgenic genes in them. So since their fathers were white men who were rapists, alcoholics, deviants, all of these other things, we can assume that those children also have those characteristics, because within eugenics, it's not just your hair color and your skin tone and your lips that are transferred from parent to child. It's also your character. So if the father was a drunk, the kids for 10 successive generations have a gene for alcoholism, according to eugenics. If the mother had a child out of wedlock, it's understood that all of her children, male and female, will be super breeders. E. Franklin Frazier, thank you, baby. Kamal Rashid, that's it. E. Franklin Frazier sat in Chicago courts for years, family court, and he basically came up with a study of the Black family and talked about disorganization. The concept of disorganization is a eugenic theme. It's a eugenic theory that says when you move Black people out of the South, out of basically a pit of nastiness and vileness, and Black women laying up with white men and having illegitimate babies, and then you put them in the North, where education is important, and the Black people up there have homes, and the Black people look and dress a certain way, they're disorganized. Now, they don't look at things again, when we're talking, Isabella Wilkerson's book, they're not talking about the folks who are coming up, who've been led to believe they're coming up to be house servants, or they're coming up because they're going to go to school. And you have a number of newspapers, the Chicago Defender, New York Amsterdam News. These are newspapers.
These are Black newspapers.
New Black newspapers. They would put ads in the paper. This is the thing. Always support your Black paper. If you have a Black newspaper now in your town, here in DC, the Washington Informer, in Baltimore, the Afro, subscribe to the newspapers. For me, Black History, subscribe to Acumen Magazine. You must always get your news from Black people. But here's one of the problems that they had with these particular productions, these publications. You had unwitting and really unscrupulous people who would say, we want some young people to come from down South and bring them up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to train them because we want to help save the race. And what they did was they got these young girls off of these buses. They paid their fare there. And it was basically, you got them here and then you exploited them. So a lot of these girls got to New York or Philadelphia or wherever it was, and then realized the only thing that they could exchange for room and board was their bodies. All right. So you look at places, I go through the records of places like Elmira and Bedford in New York, where these are girls that are coming from some part of the South. They get into New York thinking they were coming to be household maids for someone. And instead, they're met by someone at the bus station or the train station that basically says, I'm going to take you to the place where you're supposed to go. And instead, they end up in a rooming house somewhere being exploited. The police come in, they raid the joint. They think it's because you're Black and you're from the South that you came up here to sell black tail. And that's what they used to call it, the court records. They selling black tail. They would immediately arrest these girls and send them to these detention centers, Bedford, Elmira, a number of them that specialized in Black girls. And they had Black social workers that were there. And what they would do is, again, They wanted to ensure that they weren't going to have kids, so they went through this process of sterilizing them.
Sterilization. And this happened in New York, sterilizing young Black girls
Yep.
from the South.
Yep. New York, Chicago, Detroit, anywhere where that migration the migration goes from South, they come up to the North, and there's literally somebody waiting there to grab at them. This slide right here, this is the theme for eugenics and Black people. The Negro possesses two senses, sex and digestion. All right. And I want you to pay attention to that. When we start talking about pop culture, when did it get to a point where everything you were trying to sell or entertain Black people with had to have somebody that was half naked or eating?
Come on, talk about it. Now we're getting into the theme of this. The tropes, the tropes of Black masculinity. That's all about it. Yet too. We see that's extremely popular, especially on social media and in popular culture, and also Black birthing, as you said, a pathology of Black birthing. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are eager to hear more about that.
When you look at, for instance, this is a quote, this entire slide here. This is a quote from a book called Child Life. This was a book that was given to white women when they first had babies. Okay. So the fact that you have a page in that is talking about the true or full-blooded, meaning dark-skinned Black person whose forehead indicates an inability to acquire or propagate a degree of intelligence above the grade of an imbecile. Their eyes denote treachery and willingness to murder the best friend. The mouth is the highest expression of the most intense animal and brutish sensualism. They're rapists, basically. Yet his face was attractive to a woman because it was more intelligent than a dog's. This is a warning also to women, to white families. Look after your teenage daughters, because these Negroes are roaming loose, coming up from the South, hanging out on these street corners, doing whatever it is that they're doing. There were certain rules that NAACP, Urban League, they came up with rules for Black people coming from down South up to the North. And there were things like, Zakiya, if you and I are going to have a conversation, we don't stand on a corner and talk. We have to walk as we're talking. And then when we're finished having our conversation, we separate and go in two different directions. If we're ever idling, standing on the corner, just talking to each other, we would be subject to be picked up and arrested for prostitution because we're Black. Okay. So the number of Black women, it was understood Black women are hypersexual. And if they're standing there and you look at them long, they'll offer you sex. Okay.
What?
The rules, yes, darling. It's on the law books. And that's why I said, when you start looking at the true duress that some of these Black people were under when they migrated. And DC was also a hub for this foolishness as well. All right. Black women on their way to work, standing at a bus stop, police come by. What you out here for? I'm on my way to work. Where you work? There are no phones, no cell phones. All of a sudden the police pick you up and take you to jail. You got to pay a fine because the police said you were prostituting. And even if you said you weren't, whose word are they going to take? Well, you don't have the $2 or $5 or whatever it is for the bail or to get yourself released. So you are sent immediately where? Home for the feeble-minded.
Damn.
You send it out to Bedford. Right. And at that point, you're given a whole series of eugenic tests where they're trying to examine if you're an idiot, a moron, or this or that, these different labels to determine, should you be allowed to reproduce? So you're going to stay there for 2 weeks in general. That's the general amount of time. At that point, you go before the sterilization board. And if they determine you don't have the capacity to be educated or to do anything other than perhaps sell your body, they're going to take you in and sterilize you, and then they will let you loose. All right. At that point, you may have had kids that you ain't seen in 2 weeks, a husband, other family members. They don't know where you've been. They don't know where you are. And so there's a whole group of Black people who learn to just put up. They don't talk about these things. And one of the great things that's to my horror is that when you do find these books, all these books behind me, when you do start having these people write, it's always some white person. It's always a white historian. It's always a white scholar that goes in and pulls out these stories, and they make their money and their documentaries and their movies off of these. And it's literally, these are our stories. So you need to talk to your mother and your grandmother and your grandfather and just ask them, tell me what it was like when you were 15. Explain to me your interaction with the police. Everything that you're dealing with now, it was this times a million back then. You must understand it. Nothing new under the sun. And this would only scrape the surface what you're dealing with right now. There was no way for anyone to know where you were, if something had happened to you, if you were dead or alive. There was no way of any, there was no tracking your cell phone. There was nothing. And so the number of Black men who were arrested for idleness, who were arrested for vagrancy. The one guy, they said he was arrested for looking like he was up to something. All right. And they immediately took him to a jail. They fined you $50. You don't have the money. And they put you on a work gang. All right. And that's all up and down this country. So
those were the vagrancy laws, right? Vagrancy or something. Yeah.
Or they would ask you, depending on where you are, there's some parts of Maryland where they would ask you, where do you work? And you say, I don't have a job. Oh, well, that's called habitual vagrancy. Because if you don't have a job, it means that you have the potential to either rob, beat up somebody, rape somebody. The white women aren't safe, and they would immediately lock you up. Okay. You have someone who DuPont factory, the people that make the tires, they were famous. There's a Slavery by Another Name documentary and book. Slavery by Another Name.
I saw the documentary and I read the book. Yes. That's one of the white people that you talking about that made money off of telling our stories.
Exactly. And again, the number of Black men who came up missing. You're on your way to work or you're walking down the street. And this goes into the 1970s, 1980s. All right. This is in our lifetimes. All right. So you're walking somewhere trying to get to wherever it is that you're going, but you don't have that type of freedom. Okay. And so I say, well, why did you pick the person up? What did you think was going to happen? Well, these Black men, either they're going to steal or it's about sex. You want to entice a Black person, feed them. You want to entice a Black person, find a Black woman that's going to show her breast or her backside. And whatever it is that you're selling, they're going to buy it. Make them think that they'll get a woman or they'll have access to all the food and the things that they want, these desires. Then that's all you need. Okay. So it goes back to this animalistic, savage type of nature that Black people are supposed to just innately have. It's in your genes, it's in your genetics. And that hasn't changed from the 1830s and 40s when eugenics first was named until the present. All right. But if you don't understand, again, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, if you can't pull these layers apart, then you're arguing about, we need to have more Black teachers in the classroom. Well, that may be the case, but you also need to ensure that the Black person that's in there is not working from the same handbook as the white person that was in there. All right.
Well,
when we start talking life insurance, this is one of the templates, Prudential Life Insurance. If you have a policy, cancel it. All right. 1896, they hired a statistician. Frederick Hoffman, I would think is part devil, part demon or something. This guy was just on something, but he wrote a 330-page article. And when you say 330 pages, you had nothing to do with your life, but just fool around. He wrote this entire treatise called Race, Traits, and Tendencies of the American Negro. Now, all he did was sit around observing some Black people and then making up stuff. He literally made up all types of foolishness. But people took this survey, and basically what happened, Prudential Life Insurance said, we don't want to insure Black people. Why? Because Black people are intrinsically deficient. So we're going to end up having to pay out money because they're going to die and they're all unhealthy and they're all diseased. Okay. It's the reason why Black people today still have to pay more for health insurance and life insurance and then end up getting paid out less for it when the policy matures and it's time to pay out. Okay. From this document, 1896. Wow. All right. This is where it all started. And the document that
they were supposed to outlaw this.
It's never been outlawed. Basically what they said, Prudential said, we would rather go out of business and not sell policies in New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware. It was a whole group of states that said, we can't get policies and we're Black people. So they were suing. What they decided to do at Prudential was hire this man who came up with this document that says there's a scientific, medical, genetic reason why we shouldn't have to, have these policies. It doesn't we don't want to insure them. All right. Because we know anthropologically, these Negroes are going to cost us money and we don't want to do it. And so I wasn't even necessarily, I was bothered by it, but it goes into a number of Supreme Court cases that came up. They used this document. All right. Housing policies, they use this document. All right. School policies, they use this document. It had legs and it meant something. All right. It had legs. This type of stuff actually means something. And so the beauty
and
of
you
it,
can argue that they still are using this in the back of their minds today, even if they won't publicly say it.
absolutely, absolutely. It's a reason, even when you're talking health wise and you say, you go to a doctor's office. At one point, my blood pressure was elevated. All right. Now, the doctor didn't ask me any questions. She looked at me and she said, based on your race, your age, your weight, and your height, I'm going to give you this medication. I said, no, thank you. All right. You're not asking me holistically the things you
Right.
need to know to understand what my baseline, would be for this anyway. So I'm arguing the point with her. And it's like, this is what I do, ladies. So we're not even going to play like this. But, I just told her, I have a white friend who came in here and gave you the exact same information, a white male friend. And what you did was gave him a prescription to your alternative health where he's supposed to go get acupuncture and massages twice a week. What's up with this? And she said, right. Okay. So she said, black people, they respond best to medication. Which black people? I'm black. You're going to give me something. And I told her, here's the problem. When they tell you that a black person who has hypertension will automatically get diabetes or they got diabetes, the medication that you take for hypertension or to keep you from having blood clots will automatically make you have a medicine-induced form of diabetes. It's not that they go hand in hand. One is causing the other, and it's the medication. Go relax. Say your prayers. Drink the water. Get some sleep. Make love when you're supposed to. Relax your body and your mind. And it's like, don't take the medication. Fall back a little bit. Eat healthy. All right. So literally, when I started challenging this woman, I was like, I've had the death of a matriarch in the family. I've taken on, raising children that aren't mine. I'm working 3 different jobs. I'm still doing everything I'm supposed to do, but I usually don't get to sleep till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm back up at 7. That's why the blood pressure was high. I'd also been in traffic running through the streets like I lost my mind, but you didn't ask about any of that. You want to use numbers that don't fit black people in the first place. Again, VP Franklin. All right. The numbers are designed to make me believe that I'm somehow inadequate or next to the animal kingdom or whatever. And so you need to give me a pill. It's going to tear up my kidneys, cause me to have other conditions. And so it's like, no. Big black women, my body looks just like the Hottentot Venus, baby. And the Hottentot Venus wasn't eating Cheetos.
Come on.
So this to me tells me that this is a body type. All right. She was eating fruits and vegetables and doing what she's supposed to do, and she got plenty of exercise. You are not supposed to look like everybody else. It doesn't work like that. All right. But you're being told you're deficient, subhuman, sub whatever. And it's like, okay, but who are you basing the litmus test? Who are you basing these numbers on? If you expecting me to be 5'1" and be, 102 pounds, I don't think that's healthy. That's
Right.
not that's not normal.
Right.
So it's these types of things that, again, eugenics is the foundation for them, but they have tentacles that go into everything that we do today. And so again, we start watching television and you're asking, why do I never see a black man as the hero? Why do I never see a black man save a black woman?
This is the critical media studies, right? In the movies. Yeah.
Why am I looking at you can just flip through those. Why do you see black men as the drug dealers, the kingpins, the this, that, and the other, but you never see them as fathers? Why do you see them as sexual but not sensual? Can they hold their wives' hands? Can they nurse their children where the child is sick, has a cold or something? You see this father very lovingly tending to his child. No, because what you want to show him is as animalistic as possible. Eating, drinking, smoking weed, having sex. All right. Something else for the guys, just so that you understand. this thing of I'm still seeing brothers every now and again with their pants hanging off. All right. No white person is ever bothered by you walking around with your pants hanging off. They all black people say you showing your underwear and it looks unsightly and all of that. What you look like is a child. You look like a boy in his father's clothes. And that is a vision. That's an image that most white men enjoy. Be real clear about that. You are no threat to them looking like a boy in your daddy's clothes. At the same time, again, back to Frances Wilson, her lovely self, God rest her soul. You know, at the same time, your woman is standing next to you with half her clothes off, exposing herself. All right. So there's something visual in this that even if you're the brightest, most brilliant people in the world, it says that what you're reproducing is something dysgenic. It's something when you start having kids that are getting put out of school at 3. And I saw the amazing Tanette Powell, if she's on here, big ups, talking about the fact that, you know, your son is 4 or 5 years old and getting expelled from school.
Yeah, that happened to me too.
Right. This is the thing. When someone is telling you that a 3 to 5 year old is having issues and they're not, you know, conforming, what they're saying is it's not the child, it's your womb. That's you. That is a direct insult to you as a parent because you've had them from 0 to 3. So when a child is being told or parent is being told that child, there's something wrong, deficient, off, whatever that is one of the things that gets my ire up. And I don't have kids, but I'm not writing signs. We're getting ready to go down here and tear up something because what you just said is that this woman's womb is so foul that she's creating animals. She's creating things that can't be controlled. They can't sit in classes.
And that's exactly how these white teachers talk to you and some of the black ones.
Exactly. And again,
that's the language that they use. I will never forget what they said to me about my baby, but intuitively for me as a black woman, I fought back. I said, oh no, you know, you're not going to talk to me about my child like this. And I remember even before I had all of the academic language, I knew, I said, no, it's the environment. Don't try to make this innate to him. Yes. It's the environment, because guess what? I have never had anybody say the kind of things that you all say about my child. Right. No one has, and he's around all kinds of other people. He was in a prior daycare center before entering this one. It's sad. It's terribly sad, because you're right. Eugenics, now that I understand what it is over the last, you know, several years, and certainly being in contact with you and studying your work. I actually have your book, by the way. I want you to plug your book, your own book. You plugging everybody else's book. You got a book too. But one of the things that I have learned is that, especially because Jeff, Lord have mercy, he tagged me every day, all day on something about eugenics on Facebook. He forced me to know about this stuff. It's in everything across health, across the economics, across education. It's literally in everything.
Everything. And again, sometimes you look at it and you go, I can see where this could actually work in some people's favor. You know, when you start saying, you know, because this is the thing, Marcus Garvey had a form of eugenics that he used, but it was the flip. His thing was those pure black genes. Oh, they're dynamic. All right. We want these women to be black and dark too. And we want that right. And we want that hair to be natural, because and again, it was reactionary on the one hand, but it was literally like, okay, that is a form of eugenics, but it's a very positive, you know, we would look at it and be like, well, I'm not particularly bothered by that. The problem is, if in the process you're castigating folks who really have no choice but to come out the way they come out, all right, it's all in your mental state and, you know, how you handle certain things. Now, if you're the type of person who literally believes that someone is greater than or less than based upon height, weight, color, hair texture, all of this, that's a eugenic strain, all right? And what'll happen is, there were some government officials that I would deal with across the country where they would say, you know, we're having issues because we're having lawsuits that are about racism, but both parties are black. And so we don't know how to filter this. And I said, that's because it's racial, but not racist. And they're using a eugenic strain. You're basically saying this person is too black, and a person is too dark is automatically considered to be less intelligent, more susceptible to disease, less teachable, all of the nasty, negative things that you would come up. Natural hair. Your hair grows out your scalp a certain way. How could
They
that be?
had to pass laws. They had to pass laws right here in Montgomery County, Maryland, where your employer can't discriminate based on your hair. Your
Exactly.
natural hairstyle as black women and black people.
Right. And so again, how does my natural hair become unprofessional? And see, that's the thing. You didn't say I don't like it. You said unprofessional, which means it goes to my capacity. That's eugenic. All right. And that's how you make those distinctions. And when you make those types of distinctions, the law is always on your side. All right. So what about my work is unprofessional? What about this is unprofessional? What about, so you have to understand the language of oppression first and foremost. And oppression is not, white people do what they do, but it's some Black people and Hispanics and whatever other groups that are also working along that same model. Okay. But in every last one of these cultures, the darker you are, the more dysgenic you are. Okay. If you're in India and you're brown skin, you're considered.
Now, what does dysgenic mean again?
Dysgenic means you're unfit. It means genetically. Dysgenic, you're unfit. Your genes are defiled. Okay. It means that no matter what you do or who you marry or whatever else you learn, your genes are contaminated. Okay. And so dysgenic can be, it can be almost anything. It could be your posture. All right. So again, I talk about things like Yale University, Harvard University had this thing as freshmen. They would make the students walk through this room naked, and they would take a series of photos. Yeah. They would take a series of, yeah. They would take
back it up. What?
And they're called
you mean the Ivy League that everybody clap when they little Black kid get in?
Okay, but this was the whole point. What they wanted to do, they wanted to note as you walk through the room, your posture, your gait as you walk, your height, the way the slimness of your body. All
this remind me of beauty pageants.
Beauty pageants are actually eugenic. The first beauty pageants were designed by the Eugenic Records Office in Cold Springs Harbor, New York. Baby contests, they were part of what were called Eugenics Fitter Families and Better Babies contests. Okay.
Better Babies.
Babies. So baby contests, Miss America pageants. And there's a guide that I use sometimes where it'll show you if white people don't read. See, this is the other thing I want people to understand. When we talk about Black people, there's always this negative thing. White people can't read either. All right. So just stop.
Tell the truth, sister.
So here's the thing.
Tell them the truth tonight. This is real talk.
If we're having a whole batch of immigrants that are coming in, we got white people from the South who can't read and didn't go to school. You have white people in the North can't read and don't go to school. Public schools weren't even around. All right. You start having public schools when Negroes started getting educated in the basement of churches and other places, and then became, now we got to make sure that our white kids can keep up with these Negroes.
Because we was teaching our babies. We started the first public schools in this country. A lot of people don't know that. Black people did. But now when you hear certain education advocates, they'll say, well, these parents don't care about their children's education. Well, we come from a lineage of Black people who absolutely hold education high. And I'll tell you another story really quickly. And these are things that I'm passionate about. Even when so-called liberals are calling themselves being positive, particularly with this school reopening debate, I'm seeing people on both sides who are now using Black children as the bait. Well, see, now look, but see, what about all the Black children? Because they're disproportionately dying from COVID and all of this. But nobody cared about the Black children's conditions before COVID, because if we're honest, Black children were not being treated well in these public, private, charter, any of these kind of schools prior to COVID. And so for people to try to use Black children as leverage, I'm seeing it with teachers unions, and I'm also seeing it with white wealthy families who are it's right there in DC. As a matter of fact, the whole reopening DC is full of white folks. It's a Facebook group.
This is the thing. As soon as the stakes turn and people of color, I'm going to use it like that, became majority, the world became majority minority. All right. The schools were doing just fine with Black teachers in there. This is DC. Of course, you got Black teachers, and they were motherly, and the men were fatherly. and you got your lessons in, and there was a respect that was across the board.
Yeah, my
Okay.
mother-in-law taught in DC public schools. Shout
All
out to all the Black teachers.
right. So if it wasn't broke, why did you feel like you needed to fix it? No, you also have to look, you have to make sure you stay with the statisticians, okay? Understand, go back to that 330-page document. When you start looking at statistician, people are checking population, all right? Lamarckian, Mendelian, these are also eugenic themes that say too many of the wrong type of people are breeding. And we're going to be outnumbered soon enough. That's what most people are dealing with right now. All right. That's what all this Trump foolishness. I don't even want to bring him up like that, but that's what a lot of this was. It's these people saying too many of the wrong types of people. The pendulum has swung too far in the wrong direction. And so now we have all these things that we consider to be anti-American when really they're just not white. So now all of a sudden you want to fix things that weren't necessarily broken, but you start to understand, if I don't bring teachers from the Midwest and put them in DC, these white kids will be taught by Black teachers. And we don't want that. We don't want our kids that are white being taught by these dysgenic, problematic people, because somehow the education won't be the same. They're not going to get the full benefit and value of what it is that they're supposed to have. And so what you start, again, you really have to pull back and look at this, where you start to say, you know, DC City Council up until only recently was all Black, just about. All right. So in that time, it didn't stop gentrification.
No, they helped it. They helped it.
Right. It didn't stop.
Yeah, the current mayor now is helping it. She's completely she's completely on board, you know, with the developers, and, you know, she's getting her money out of it. Yeah.
It didn't stop any of these things. So vulnerable populations. And that's why I said, if you don't understand where Black people fit into this, my book, In Search of Purity, deals specifically with Black people and eugenics. It deals with Black people who took on and adapted and adopted these theories and made them their own. And so it is nothing in the world like me walking into a space where it's full of Black people, and the folks are there, but they haven't seen a picture of me yet. And I walk in and they're giving me nasty eye and looking me up and down. And sometimes, you know, I used to come in with the couture, big girl couture, straight from Paris. I'm out there. And I started saying, no, you're here to listen to what I'm saying. I'm not giving you any filters. I'm going in with jogging pants on. This is how we're going to do this for a while. The way people scrutinized me until I got up and started talking, I said, this is the thing. I'm going to show you the video of you when I came in, and how you looked at me and how you sneered and talked to me and side-eyed me, because this is part of the problem. As Black people, we don't have that luxury. We don't have the luxury to dismiss people and make it seem as if they're less than based upon any other criteria other than our characters. So now if I'm cursing you out and acting a fool, yeah, you got a right to call me on it. Other than that, you don't get to do that. That's not the way we work. I see Michael Van Nat is saying Black hair discrimination happens on HBCUs. I would tell you, look at HBCUs in the last 100 years and look at the campus queens. I'm going to leave that right there. I'm not going to touch it. You know who these campuses are by who they choose to represent them as their body. Now, the school presidents, the student presidents, SGA presidents, all of that, okay. But who you pick by popularity as your king and your queen tells me where your mind is, all right? And so I'm not saying that you got to run out and, you know, the person got to have the natural and the afro and all that. But you just look at it and you tell me what you see. And then you tell me when, you know, you start looking at the eugenic construct for what is beauty, the beauty aesthetic, what is acceptable, what shows that you have good genes. And you tell me whether the person is Black or white, if they fit that template. What I always say, if you saw how the Eugenics Records Office determined who was considered to be beautiful and acceptable with their bodies, going back to the Ivy League, the kids have to walk through this room. They're taking pictures of their dimensions. This is what becomes normal. This is what your clothing is based upon. So when you go to a store as a Black person and you giving me this as a size 12, this doesn't fit a Black person that's supposed to be a size 12. It's off. It's something, the arms are not, you know, there's no room in it. The Black men are always saying, I go to buy jeans, the crotch, the inseams are always off. Why? Because they're not using your body to create the
It's
fashion
so
page.
true. It happens to my husband all the time.
Right? They're using the bodies of these white people who are Ivy
The
League.
bodies of white people and the clothes for Black women. There's never enough room in the butt area, in the hips area. You always have to get a size up, and it looks weird.
Right. So the waist is not fitting where the hips may be fitting. And it's like, okay, because your body wasn't made for this. At the same time, at Ivy League schools that were for girls, the Ivy League schools that were for the guys, the goal was to partner the young people up that they took the nude pictures of to ensure that these people married each other and produced good quality American stock. Okay. And sometimes with HBCUs, you'll see the same thing. All right. You know, I don't want to use them as an example, but I will. The Morehouse guys got together with the Spelman girls. Okay. That was the, you know, so there's certain Black.
That was the good stop.
Right. Because it was assumed
I even noticed among the HBCUs, there are hierarchies. There's Howard, there's those two, Spelman and Morehouse, but very few people rank Central State or Wilberforce or those HBCUs high. It's interesting.
Okay, I got a copy. In my book, so you see what it looks like.
And I put the link in there so people can go and buy it.
We deal with, they called them at the time the Big Eight. The Big Eight HBCUs. The rest of the universities didn't count.
I can tell. They still don't.
So Rockefeller, Carnegie, the Eugenics Records Office, they funded the Big Eight. Okay. And then with Tuskegee specifically, Tuskegee had a special relationship with the Eugenics Records Office because they did measurements of the students there. And then the students, having learned eugenics and how it works, went into the community surrounding Tuskegee University, and they did measurements of the people there. All right. So
Lord have mercy.
All of those.
My husband is in the background listening. He loves Tuskegee, and I'm sure his mind is completely blown right now.
Well, you know, this is the thing. Tuskegee has a rough history with a lot of stuff, and I'll get into this at a later date. I'm going to touch on this real quick, but the syphilis experiments was also a part of the original serological testing that was done with money from Carnegie and the Eugenics Records Office. And Tuskegee was only one place that they talk about, but there were 5 states that had these syphilis serological experiments going on at the same time. Okay. Mississippi was another state that had it, and they dealt specifically with prepubescent children between the ages of 8 and 14. They injected them. I see a lot of revisionist history now where they're saying these Black men had syphilis and they just didn't treat them, or they pretended to treat them. They injected them with syphilis. They injected them with syphilis. Okay. When it comes to Mississippi, they injected the children with syphilis. The goal
I have never heard about this with the children. Never in my life.
You have got to look, you got to take my class. The documents are all on JSTOR. These people thought that they were doing great science. You understand? So they didn't determine we're going to hide our records.
Why should we trust these devils now with COVID? You know, Biden nobody blinked, Dr. Sherman, when Biden literally just elevated a geneticist who mapped the Human Genome Project to a cabinet level position. Nobody batted an eye. And as soon as I saw that press conference, it was on a Saturday. It was the Saturday before his inauguration. And I was in my car listening to it, and I froze at the light. People was blowing at me to go, because I was like, he is elevating a eugenicist, and there's no articles about it. Nobody is up in arms about it. This is it's hidden, but you're saying it's on JSTOR, but you are brave as a doctor to be talking about this, because I feel like academics who are actually in these institutions, they're afraid to talk about it and lose tenure or something.
But this is the thing. You know, tenure for most of them is an illusion. All right. And so my thing is, if you already have your PhD and you got to work that hard to be accepted by people who don't want you in the first place, you need to rethink that. I always said I wanted a PhD. I wanted to do history, but I do public history because I don't think that this information needs to be stuck in a classroom. It needs to go to the people who need to know it. You know, that's part of the problem. We're walking around here just skipping. We skipping and jumping. And you know, we got people putting $24 million diamond implants in their
I saw that. Oh my God.
Okay, so that's right. So I was gonna say, it's late in the day. All right. It's time out for, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want, the information is right there. And all I keep telling Black people, don't do it because it's Black History Month. Do it because you're never supposed to stop learning. These records are now available. Where I had to dig through musty archives, they've digitized it and it's still accurate. You can go in and look at the Mississippi Project. You can go and look at, they're called the serological experiments. Here's the other thing. This is why I'm telling you that these folks did not have syphilis, because I actually read the data. And you know what it said? We're getting an extreme amount of false positives on the Wasserman test. There are only 2 places in the world where you're getting infants that have positive Wasserman tests for syphilis, but it's not congenital. The mother didn't have it. The baby has come out, but the baby tests positive. The parents are testing positive, but nobody has any lesions. The syphilis isn't showing up like that. They can't figure out why it's in their bloodstream. Here we go. You read through the study, and what you find out is the only other place in the world who has the same issue is in the south of France. It's a little village. They traveled all the way to the south of France. What the hell is going on? It's 1930. They determined, and I've said everybody from the Nation of Islam is going to get a kick out of this one. Only the Negroes in the south that was down there and the folks in the south of France were eating those chitlins. They were eating the intestines of those pigs, and there was a bacteria that was in the intestines that was causing a positive Wasserman test.
Chitlins.
They administered a separate test to the folks in the south of France that was more elevated. And what did they find out? All of those tests were actually negative. When it came to the Black people that were down there in the American South, we ain't giving them a second test, because we're getting money now from Carnegie and from Rockefeller and from all these other people, just like you getting money right now for all these other tests for whatever it is that's going on with folks to quote unquote study and come up with this and come up with that. And so what we're going to do is rub your back with liniment and yada, yada. But we're going to tell you that you have syphilis. I have 2 relatives. They've since passed, not related to syphilis, but they were 9 and 11 years old in Mississippi, and they were injected with syphilis. Okay. I know this
own relatives were injected as children.
These
devils injected Black children with syphilis.
The goal was to determine if they could inject the children with syphilis before they reached puberty. Would it cause them to not go through a full puberty? Would it keep them from having kids? Okay. So Mississippi was saying, we're not even trying to waste the money cutting you open to sterilize you. If we can inject you. They kept an uncle and aunt of mine for 2 weeks. They took them from school, so their parents had no idea where they were. Took them, the government came and got them. All right. They were 9 and 11 years old. They took them to Greenville, Mississippi they were in the Delta near Clarksdale.
Greenville is in the Delta. I've actually been there before. Right. I got a colleague of mine lives there.
They were living on a farm that was closer to Clarksdale, Duncan, there in that Shelby area. They took them 20 miles away. So all the kids that they took from this school, their parents didn't have cars. So your child is picked up and you're told, oh, they took them because it's something going on at the school. The government came and got them. The health department has them. They kept them for 2 weeks. Okay. And what they reported was every day they gave them what they called a buttermilk shot. They gave them something that was white and cloudy as a shot and called it a buttermilk shot. And they just told them, there's something going on with your blood and we just want to test you out and da, 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 da. When they left, they took them back home. That was it. But now what you have subjects that you don't believe will ever leave that area. These are poor, rural Black people who you believe working on as sharecroppers. They're never going to leave this particular area. So you can study them for a long period of time. All right. So this aunt and this uncle, fortunately, the uncle ended up going into the military at some point. He got whatever. Neither of them ever experienced or had lesions or any of that, but it was in their bloodstream. And thank God my aunt lived into her 80s. It didn't work. She had 7 kids. The kids had kids. It did, but she left from down there so they weren't able to continue to take her blood and study and to determine whether or not she could or couldn't have children. But you had test subjects. And so vulnerable populations are just that. All right. And so when you look at someone, what's her name with the sterilization victims, Elaine Riddick.
Yeah, Elaine Riddick. Yeah.
Riddick. I actually went down to North Carolina and listened to her testimony when she gave it in 2011. All right. I'm listening to all of these women and men, some black, some white, because if you were poor and you were white, you were considered to be a nigger. That's it. That's real talk. That's real language. Okay. So you had all these people down there. The reality of it was they were telling them things like, it's because you're poor. Okay. You don't deserve to have kids. All right. We don't want you to have kids. And if you could actually leave that space and you're no longer a part of this test pattern, then you're more likely to not be subject to whatever else is going on. All right. But the goal was to ensure, as these migrating families, these sharecropping families, they're having 10, 11, 15 kids, just like when we're talking about enslavement. The more babies you have, that's your currency. That's the white man's currency. But now these Negroes are talking about voting. So all of a sudden, a family of 15, that's 15 votes. So all of a sudden, we don't want you here anymore, or we definitely don't want you reproducing. So if you migrate out of here, we're not even that bothered by that. Go ahead and migrate north. Go on up there. But don't be down here trying to vote and change the way we do things in the South. And so they figured if we can study them, if we can sterilize them, if we can keep them from having families that could unify and really do damage politically, economically, socially, start running for political office and all this other stuff, it would be problematic. All right. We have to be able to connect the dots between the eugenic constructs, the social policies, the laws, and then pop culture. All right. So it's again, pop culture is feeding you all types of information.
It really is. It's terrible.
It's horrendous.
Social media.
And social media is part of it. So you see somebody white sit down and they pop them in the arm, or they start telling you, oh, you can't get a shot in your neighborhood. Why? Because you start telling a black person that they're being denied something that makes them want it.
I peeped that too. And right. I said, that's propaganda. Y'all ain't forcing reparations on us. And I had to tell that to one of my friends. I said, since when have these people ever wanted us to be at the front of the line for something? Think about it. Just think about it. When in history that if it was good for us, let me clear that up. Something that they want us to be in the front of the line for that was good for us. I said, we have been asking and organizing for reparations since the damn proclamation emancipation.
Yep.
And they've never. And so listen, black people need to be negotiating. Y'all want us to get this damn thing so bad. Well, you got to sit down and talk about reparations first, period, dot. And I'm not talking about HR 40 because that's a study.
Right.
Y'all done studied us enough. Listen to Dr. Sherman. Y'all done studied us a damn enough. It's
You have studied until you don't need to study anymore. And so that's the crux of the whole issue. White people are starting to know more about how to tick us, how to turn us. And that becomes the problem. So it's like, all right, remember when COVID first came out? And it didn't take but a week before somebody said black people are dying in disproportionate numbers. How the hell did you come up with that?
How the hell you know?
Yeah. And I saw, I'm having somebody in Richmond came out with a study and said 100% of the people who have died from COVID-19 are African American. And I said, okay, open up the thing and read it. Do you when you go through all of this, click the link where it says the study, click it and read it. Do you know how many people that amounted to? 8.
Wow.
So 100% of 8 means 8. That's it. So all 8 people that died, that's not something that you set policy over. It was like, what did the 8 people have in common? Were they just, it was like, are you dumb? So you went from telling me that it's, again, whether it's syphilis or the Spanish flu or AIDS or whatever else, black people are going to get it, and they're the ones dying in disproportionate numbers until we're no longer dying in disproportionate numbers. And then you stop talking about that. Then it becomes, to keep you from dying, go ahead and take it. So if we're going to die anyway, and that's where you headed, let's take our chances because we all right. All right. It's women in Africa right now had full-blown AIDS. They walking around having kids. They don't have it anymore. Don't keep doing that to people. Give a person a chance to have something and get over it. All right. All of us have had the flu or something close to it at some point. And so this is not a survival of the fittest type of deal. I'm not saying that. There are people who are truly at risk every year for the flu.
Yeah.
Or for pneumonia. All right.
Yep.
So that's why I said, Tell me the numbers.
And it's funny. I've seen several people point out, like, wow, the flu just disappeared this year. Like, we're not even hearing about the flu. Ain't nobody died from the flu this year. And so obviously people are thinking, yeah, people are just counting it as COVID.
Yeah. Well, and of the reality of, I've had a lot of people globally say 2017, 2018 was the worst flu strain ever. And we had more deaths than we even have now. Right. So it's like, look, I always tell people, don't quote numbers to me unless you can back the numbers up, because you're just repeating stuff. Show me the actual study, and then I'll break the numbers down for you. And then we'll get to a point where you realize, oh, that's not exactly true.
That's why it's good to have somebody like you a phone call away to help me understand some of this stuff, because I can say intuitively my spirit ain't right with it. But in terms of like reading the actual reports, like you said, that's so funny, because there's been a dumbing down of America for so many years, especially the last several decades. When it comes to the education system, they actually don't expect people to say, let me actually read the study. Let me actually break down the numbers. And you have that skill.
And I get that skill from two folks. Again, I love Lincoln, Nebraska for this. Dr. Willie Hughes, who's a virologist who has his own labs, and Dr. Sophia Sparks, who works with me through Acumen. Anytime something comes up, is, hey, doc, tell me what's going on with this. Break it down to me. And literally, as soon as COVID hit, Dr. Sparks was pregnant, and so I'm saying, I'm so concerned about you. And she's like, girl, don't worry about it. Okay, wait, tell me she's like, the masks, okay, fine. You want to wear the mask just as a precaution, that's fine. But the reality is, it's just like with a condom. The germs are tiny. They're so small that the mask ain't really going to help you.
I know that too. Right. Especially the kind of mask they telling us to wear. The cloth mask ain't saving your ass from COVID. I mean, I'm not trying to turn people off, because people are like, they're really like, inoculated with the news, and like, you're gonna die tomorrow as soon as you get COVID. So
she said, there's certain what is it, P55 or whatever. It's a couple of those masks that will
N95, yeah.
N95, right? Okay. It's a couple of them that will serve as a barrier if someone else has it, and da da da. So she said, wear your mask. I have gloves when I go out. I have little blue gloves just as a precaution. So she's like, if you out, but don't linger. You can't be, in intimate spaces with people, yada yada. So she's like, all right, take the necessary precautions. But she said, again, it's like a condom. There's always that chance that something slips through. So I carry spray with me, and so we go through that whole process. But I'm talking to scientists, and they're Black scientists, and I trust them. All right, take your vitamins. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Get plenty of rest. Some of this is just Dr. LaJoyce Brookshire. If you can check her out, I go holistic with everything, and it's literally Black people are going to have to get to a point where they're taking better care of their health overall. That's just the reality of it. All right. And so at this point, since you can't go to the doctor's office if you wanted to right now, you really don't want to anyway. It's like, okay, drink your water, eat your vegetables, be in the bed. She usually says by 10 o'clock, when it's getting dark, start going to bed, listen to your body. All right. Take the necessary precautions with anything. And so I'll go with that. But these people who are feeding you images of someone, here's another Black person on the cover of the paper taking a shot. Come on. I'm not getting ready to fall for that. I'm not falling for it. So it's like, all right, the other thing is, and I pray to God that I have another 50 years, but when it's time to leave here, it's time to go. All right. It's time to go. So, this thing of, I don't want to get something. I don't want to, we all gotta leave here. Do your best, do what you're supposed to do. I think most Black people have said, I had something last year before they start talking about COVID.
Yeah, my cousin was one of them. She said before it actually hit the news, she said, I remember going to my doctor, and they was like, well, I don't know what this is. So it's real. Nobody's sitting here saying it's not real, but they treated it. She said they actually treated me like it was the flu.
The flu, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though the flu test came back negative. Remember, they didn't have the COVID test.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, but you survived it.
And she survived it. Exactly. And honestly, when you look at, there you go, look at the numbers. When you look at the numbers, and I have to remind people of this, the vast majority of people are actually surviving COVID. The media focuses on, and I'm not saying, the people who passed away from COVID, it doesn't matter, because I actually had a cousin that passed away in March from COVID in New York when they were intubating everybody. Remember, they gave the hospitals the extra $40,000 for ventilators. They was just putting people on ventilators, and come to find out, you put somebody on ventilators, they actually increased their chance that they would actually die. So my cousin was one of those. He was only 45 years old. He was intubated, and he passed away. He also had previous conditions, as they say. If you get COVID and you have previous conditions, that does make it worse. And he had asthma, because COVID attacks your lungs. Yeah.
And I was getting ready to say, and a lot of it also, when everything first started coming out, what you would hear are reports that said the person had a heart attack. All right. And that's how they died. But as they were dying, or once they passed away, they swabbed them. And if the test came back positive for COVID, they would say it was a COVID-19 related death. No, it wasn't. It was a heart attack. All right. So a lot of these deaths are being blamed on COVID when it really wasn't a COVID death. All right.
We're seeing that too. Yeah.
Right. Or the medication that they gave you shut your kidneys down.
Yep.
That's what we kept seeing that. So it's like, okay, the person didn't die from COVID. They died because you gave them this cocktail of drugs that their kidneys couldn't process and flush out quick enough. And that's what actually caused them to go into renal failure. So again, it's like, okay, protect yourself as much as possible. I see blind folks. A lot of people in Texas and Louisiana got sick in November, December, January. Yes. Yep. But they all had COVID symptoms back in November, December. Yeah. And so it's, again, I always say Black people in their bodies, the amount of stress. And then people are saying, oh, well, the stress is what will cause people, your body, your immune system is not functioning properly because of the stress that you're under. Well, I always say, at a time when Black men were being hung from trees walking down the street, and Black women were being, randomly raped going home from work or church, Mrs. Reese Taylor and all of that, it's like you weren't dying in astronomical numbers from any other viruses that were going on at that point. So stop letting people feed stuff into your heads where you, again, walk into this eugenic stream of, oh my goodness, we're doomed. We're tragically Black. Something's going to hit me and harm me. And again, the white people that don't want to wear the mask. All right, well, if you feel like you got it going on, then, you do what you're doing. All right. But again, so when they start right now, if you look at the states that have the highest number for COVID-related COVID deaths and people, struggling with COVID right now, Montana, Arizona, Nebraska, Iowa. It's like, all right, just, you don't want to wear that mask right now. Well, it's 8 Black people there. Well, the 8 Black people, I'm sorry, y'all go this way, stop hanging out with your white friends, not being funny. But it's like, you find out they're working in plants and we're not taking the precautions. We're not making people wear masks. And so you have an entire workforce or towns and communities that are being plagued with this. So take the vaccine out there. Why are you coming into DC where the numbers are relatively low and talking about the Black people in Southeast can't get the vaccine? The Black people in Southeast don't want the vaccine.
Thank you. I be commenting on these news things. I'm like, we don't want it. Stop pushing this propaganda. I'm not getting it. We don't want it.
We don't want that. Yeah, we don't want that. And so again, white college students have stated they learn better with Black professors. Yes, they do. They absolutely do. The problem is most Black professors, especially if they're at predominantly white universities, they have to go through a rating system, not just from the students, but also from their peers. And so what you'll find is if you're in places where white male authority still reigns, female and Black people get the worst scores, which means that their tenures are always in jeopardy. And so it's like all the stuff that you're doing and whatever the rest that you're under, it's like it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter at all because, the students, and then you have some students who are trained like that, where it's like, I don't care what I'm teaching. If I'm Black and I'm female, when it comes time to grade me, it'll be like, well, she spent a lot of time, flicking her hair. Did you learn anything, dummy? And so, so my thing is, again, I want Black people to understand that long before you ever were able to enter into a university, you knew how to accept information and wisdom from someone who was trying to give it. Okay. For the last 6 years, I've done these lectures for free. And I did them every week. And just like with now, we're running into an hour and 40 minutes. And I'm good with that. I came up under the feet of Dr. Welsing, and she would start talking sometimes at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and it'd be 2 o'clock in the morning. We still sitting there like, tell
That's
it.
love. That's love.
Right?
And so I appreciate you.
That's the way I was trained. And I always say, as long as you're still in the room and we still hashing it out, keep asking questions. I'm going to keep answering. I want you to walk away from this not with just a bunch of information that you repeat on social media. You need to be able to take this stuff and enact some change. You need to call people out on their foolishness. All right. Yeah. You need to be able to tell. But again, the birth control issue, when you pull this up, it makes me stop. The birth control review, Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, all of that. In 1932, June of 1932, they had an entire issue called the Black Edition.
Yep.
Okay. And again, it's on JSTOR. You can literally go online and you can read that entire edition of the magazine where Black people are talking about how other Black people shouldn't be able to have kids. And these are some of our greatest leaders. These are some amazing Black men and women. All right. So when I started reading stuff like, one of these people is talking about, Negroes constitute a large percentage of the human scrap pile. Dang, that's rough. The least desirable stocks of Black people. These are the conversations that were being had by your leaders. And so if you could do this in 1932, at a time when we are just getting to a point where we're getting our footing and we're coming out of one war, and we're in the interwar years where Black people have made some progress. They moved to the North. They've gotten to a point where they're owning property again and businesses. They're going to school. They're getting their footing, and they're becoming American citizens, full stop. You turn around and have your Black leaders of the day say, nah. And it's Black migrants. When they say Black migrants, that's people migrating from the South to the North. So you're making a distinction between different geographical spaces. You're saying Black people from the South are backward. And you hear that even today.
Sure do.
The country ones, today. Yeah, country ones or the ghetto ones for that matter. They're ghetto. All right. If somebody says they're from east of the river, they're from southeast, you immediately come up with a whole group of stereotypes that will allow you to dismiss them ad hoc, full stop.
Sadly, I see it all over social media.
Exactly. And we like to make fun of folks. We like to laugh at them, and that's part of the problem. Because at one point, the only people who were the butt of the joke was us. And then we got to a point where we could break apart and start saying, well, no, we're going to make that person the butt of the joke. And then if it's enough of us, we can laugh at them, and that becomes, again, problematic. If we're looking at birth control laws now, it's some sisters, a couple of sisters, the Ralph sisters, Mary Alice and Minnie. Again, Alabama. I'm sorry. In the shadow of Tuskegee once again. Ages 12 and 14 in the 1970s, 73, 74. They were being given Gardasil shots in 1973, 74, and it was determined that the Gardasil shot was toxic.
Wow.
Back then. So now you got people running around talking about giving kids Gardasil shots again and making it part of an inoculation. All right. You got to be real careful with this. Yep. When they determined that the cocktail that they were giving them was toxic, the girls weren't even sexually active, but one of the Black neighbors said, it's too many little Black boys coming around their yard. The public health nurse, who was Black, came and picked them up, took them to the health center, to the Black community hospital, and sterilized both of them.
The Black nurse.
Yep. They had the doctors come in, they sterilized both of the girls, and they said this cannot be considered racism because the doctors and nurses that were there were Black. So they never received a single dime for this. And these women are very much alive now. They're part of the current research that I'm dealing with. But one of the things that came out of that was, right now, if you ever go to the doctor, they tell you have to sign a consent form. The consent forms in this country, the reason why you have them now is because of those two sisters. You have to have informed consent. If they're too young at 12 and 14, they shouldn't have been able to sign for themselves anyway. Their parents only marked with an X. So it was like when you see a full signature, the parents were like, I couldn't have wrote that because I can't write my name. So it wasn't me. So you forged some documents in the meantime. So the law of informed consent came about specifically because of these two young Black girls. All right. And so basically, it's like the ACLU, all these other people got in it. The laws got changed. But this is an ongoing issue. If it's a Black person, male or female, and you are in prison, people don't understand this. There are certain wardens and administrators that'll tell you, brother, if you want to get out of jail tomorrow, today,
sterilized.
Right, sign this.
It was on the news just 3 years ago. A judge in Tennessee told a Black man that he would let him out if he would get a vasectomy.
And that is a policy in California that's been going on for years. It still goes on today. And you don't want to stay in jail. So you say, all right, go ahead and knock it out. But here's the theory. These are modern day eugenicists who are saying things like, one, if it's a mother, especially if she's in prison, it means the children that she already has are subject to a state environment. It means that the state is already paying for their upkeep.
Paying for it.
They're on welfare, they're in foster care, they're with a relative, so the state is paying in. All right. The other thing is, if the mother is in prison, it means that she produces bad stock, which means her children will automatically become criminals. So one of the things that they were also doing was charting those children that she already had to determine if they had mental or behavioral problems so they could pull them in and sterilize them as well. All right. You got to be really, really clear and really, really careful about a lot of the stuff that's going on. And it's not to be alarmist about it at all.
It's just the truth. And people need to deal with it. Yeah.
Right. This is just it.
You know, I've been reading a book on this channel, and I don't know if you've ever heard of the brother, The Choice by Dr. Samuel Yet. As you know, he talks about a lot of that too. He talks about birth control and sterilizations was actually the policy that came out of the Nixon administration as a response to poverty. Yep. Like, well, if y'all so hungry and poor, y'all don't need to be having no more kids. Right. And you'll hear people make arguments that, and I knew that was a eugenic argument. He doesn't use eugenic language in here because, as you know, he was an investigative journalist.
Yeah.
And this book was actually shadow banned, and it's $700 now on Amazon. So I'm actually reading the book as a service to the community. And as you know, it was written early in 1971, 50 years ago this year. But there's so many things that I draw connections to that's happening today that he was warning Black people about then. You understand me?
Right. And again, it's a, Sam Yet, love him dearly. He worked at several Black newspapers, and you know, we crossed paths a couple times, and it's just like, okay, just
because he lived in this area.
Right. It's extremely difficult. I would have people, I say, okay, I'm going to do this lecture. Come on out, check me out, whatever. The first thing people say, are you going to have food? No, I'm not feeding you. I'm feeding your mind. I don't have time I'm not, just like, stop. I need you to not do that. Okay. And so it's important. Again, you're streaming all types of stuff right now. You're streaming feel good things. All right. So it's a reason why they're trying to do Coming to America 2 right now.
Tell me about that.
Because literally what's happening is people are being nostalgic. It's a reason why you're watching old episodes of Martin. It's a reason why somebody has come up with the design to do a Hillman University t-shirt, knowing that Hillman was off of this TV show. It's enough Black people that went to real HBCUs that you don't need to do a feel-good sweatshirt. I'm not bothered by it, but I'm just like, okay, this is a little weird. Everyone wants to be nostalgic because they're in panic mode. We're extremely anxious right now. So you're watching things that make you feel good. They're triggering certain things. All right. They're trying to get you to a point where you're just kind of lulling out. I'm always telling folks, I'm watching certain things. I'll tell me what's going on Netflix or something else so that I'll be able to know what it is that you're streaming. I want to see what you're watching. Okay. But if I had my druthers, I would stay on YouTube or something, flicking around with dumb stuff. It was like, I always tell people, I'm watching Leave It to Beaver. I'm watching white people do dumb stuff. I don't want to get into some of this other stuff because I realize the politics involved. I'm deconstructing. All right. I'm looking at the shy and I'm breaking it apart. All right. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's tragic. All right. Or I'm watching certain things. And then when I start telling people, you need to be mindful of this, they want to argue about it. It's like, no, I need you to pay attention to what it is that you're watching because you're ingesting certain things. And you tell me, I don't want to watch the Real Housewives of whatever, but I'm stuck on it. I can't stop watching it. You know why they call it programming?
Right. Because it's technically programming you. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay, I need you to fall back. I need you to pay attention. You just can't have this on in the background, where you're cutting up like that. You know what I mean? So I'm telling folks, if you want to do movies, these are the movies that you watch, and then let's break them apart so that you can actually see this is what goes on in this. This is what this means. I start the series off when we do the whole film series. Claudine, I do that first. We're gonna talk about Black women and having kids and romance and how poverty, if a person is considered poor, they can't afford to have romance. Children are considered to be a burden. Even if this mother loves her child, the first thing she starts talking about is, how do I feed them? What do the teachers say about this? I tell
That's
most
actually why abortion and I know, like, my liberal friends and everything, they get upset with me when I say this, but I remember asking, why are all the Planned Parenthoods on the Black side of town? Why? And they make it, no, it's just, it's about the poor women. And of course, if poor women want an abortion, they should be able to get one. But it's, to me, I link it. I say the same thing about COVID. I say, well, actually, if the poor women want a job, can they get one too?
well, come on. Okay, here's the
I'm
thing.
serious though. Like, y'all want to give us free abortions, free. The Ford Foundation funds plan. Oh, we need to go just look at the list of who funds Planned Parenthood, right? I mean, so you won't give people health care in the Black community, right? You won't give them grocery stores in the Black community, but we'll have a Planned Parenthood. See, I'm a critical thinker. You know what I mean?
Hey.
I just be asking simple questions. Ain't nothing deep about these questions that I'm asking. 1 + 1 ain't equaling 2 a lot of times.
Nope.
Especially from liberals when they try to make it about, this is about love. This is about making sure that the poor women, because rich women can pay for their abortions, right? That's literally the argument they're using in 2021.
And the problem with that is, once again, you talk to the average, I don't care how young she is. If she finds out she's pregnant, abortion is the last thing on her mind. She'll say, I don't want to tell my mama. I don't want my parents to go haywire.
How many Black poor women did what they had to do and raise their babies? A lot of times they never thought about abortion until white women and white folks started coming into our community selling it to us.
And what they would do is basically, again, I went through all of Margaret Sanger's notes, and she started saying things like, you have to tie, for Black people, you have to tie modernity. You have to tie the fact that this Black woman can be all she can be. She can go back to school and get that degree. She can go and do this. She doesn't have to have a husband. But if you have that kid, it tethers you to things that you don't want. It brings you down. And so it's not an accident. It's not an accident. You now, in this day and age, have more Black women with advanced degrees than ever. And then when they get to about 40, 45, it's like, oh shit, I forgot to have kids. I didn't get married to have kids. It's not by accident, because you're telling them, well, you're not really ready to get married and the guy's not really ready, but you can still date. And as long as you don't have kids, you can have your best life, still live like a teenager. You can have your advanced degree. You can have the house on the hill by yourself if you want to. All right. And so it's like you start to build relationships as problems. It's a reason why you have these movies. Why Did I Get Married? And what is the one where the two can play that game, and all these movies about Black people that can't get along. We've been getting along, making love and having babies since we got here under the most immense duress ever. And when families were broken apart with no cell phones, no telephones, no house, no car, you got on with your feet and started walking, and you would walk from state to state till you found your husband or your wife and your kids and brought them back. One of the things, again, studying these Black newspapers, you would find people 30 years, 40 years after slavery had ended, still looking for their brothers and still looking for their sisters and still looking for their parents. They were last on the plantation in such and such a place. We weren't running around dismissing our kids and our family members like that. And it was never about money. It was about you being present. So, and again, you look at things economically. Out of enslavement, the first job that most Black men could get that paid money, serious money, was as Pullman porters. Why? because it meant that you were going to leave that woman and those kids vulnerable over here. The money was good, but you were away from them most of the time, which meant they were vulnerable to whoever and whatever came past them. All right. That's systematic. All right. And so if you did decide that you're going to stay, then you're under a different type of, arrest with these white folks that, oh, you think you this. And so again, you start looking at things like you got arrested for sassing a white man. What is that? So it's just one of those things. Stop talking about black men going to jail. I'm telling black people, look, white people are going to do what white people have always done. I don't even want to hear about them no more. You can cut them out of the equation. I have white friends. We all right. We're good. Okay. My point to black people is you falling off. You need to sew your line. You need to hew that line and pull it up because you're coasting right now and you can't afford to do that. If my grandfather could do it and do it well as a sharecropper making, if he could clear it, $100 a year with a family of 13, okay? It's no way in the world you can't do it now where you actually got a halfway decent job. You got access. And I'm going to tell you something. I've never seen this much mobility where black men can literally sit at home and make stuff. You can do stuff. You can do it. But you got other people in your head telling you, no, that ain't enough. And you don't have and and yada, yada, yada. We knew how to get through this. And we knew how to navigate it. You can't have everything right now. All right. Delayed gratification. You got to, you working hard for it, but you can't have it right now. Wait it out a little bit, just a little bit. All right. It's a reason for that. It's a rationale behind that. All right. This thing of, I want to wear the best clothes, even though I ain't going nowhere because it's COVID. I want to look a certain way and I want to present myself a certain way instead of saying, if I got the extra $50 and you got an extra $50, let's see if we can find out how to pool this money and put it somewhere where, we invest in a dilapidated property over there in Northeast off of 8th Street somewhere before the gentrifiers even get there. All right. So you have people that are doing this thing where it's called buying back the block. All right. So a lot of white folks then left. Why? Because they don't have any money either. One more time. They don't have any money either. One more time for the people in the back. White people don't have any money either. Okay. And so when you're in a space like DC where the federal government or these restaurants that they put up here and all the bars, and guess what? They're boarded up. They went back home. So now the buildings are boarded up again. All right. Nobody wants that because the people.
I noticed that in New York City. A lot of my friends that live in New York City said white folks have fled the city. The ones that was gentrified in, they gone.
Exactly. And so it's like, okay, at a point where we can actually get that property back. If somebody asked you today or tomorrow, you got an extra $1,000 to put into this? Nah, because it's on my feet. I just bought these Gucci boots. Come on. We knew better. We know better. We know better. And so that's why I said I'm gonna keep messing with the brother with the gold, with the diamond in his forehead, because it's just simple in a different type of way. You have to be, you can't buy what you want and beg for what you need.
Woo! Come on.
Buy what you want and beg for what you need. You got to stop it. Okay. You just can't do it. Okay. We got to get to a point where we're not running around. Oh, we at a digital divide. I can't afford a laptop. And it was like, but your kid got the PS5. Come on. Just roll it back and make it make sense to me. All right. I'm going to help you if I can, but I'm not going to let you buy what you want and hang out and then tell me you don't have it. And I pay for what it is that you actually need. We're not going to do that. You got to have better sense than that. All right. Your kid at some point is going to want to or need to go to college. You plan for that the day that kid comes out the womb. All right. That's the way
that the second time. The first time around, I wasn't hip.
I mean, that's the thing. I have twin nephews. I don't have kids, but my thing was the day they were born, it was like, what stock is moving right now? Once you're not running around buying you a whole bunch of polo baby clothes and all this other stuff, you're gonna grow out of that stuff or poop it up because you're a baby. What stock is there that I can invest in for you so that by the time you're 13, like them Jewish kids, all right, I'm gonna give you a black mitzvah, baby. I'm gonna have enough money set aside over here when you turn 13 that you can invest and buy that building. All right. You can do some things so that if you want to play music, you can join this symphony or travel and do other things.
Changing mindsets.
Change your mindset. It's some very, very basic types of stuff. Do you need it or do you want it? And if you tell me that you need it, I'm going to tell you, wait 30 days and see if you still need it. And if you forgot about it.
Do you realize I've just trained myself, and I'm outing myself? You know, like I said, I can't say it's real talk, and then I don't do real talk, but I'm outing myself. I'll be 40 years old this year. And just within the last several years, I realized, you know, I needed a financial planner, right? My husband and I, you know, worked our way up, and as they say, bootstrapped our way, and just having conversations with him, I'm like, oh wow, you know, we need life insurance policies, or we need, you know, disability insurance. And well, you know, politically, my husband don't really believe in the market, but he believes in commodities. He was like, well, you do the market and then I'll do some gold and silver. And now it's Bitcoin, you know. So but I oftentimes I kick myself, Dr. Sherman, because here I am, didn't get started till my late 30s. And I think about where I could have been now. Like, I probably wouldn't even have to be working for nobody right now if I had a did what I needed to do, even as an early, because it wasn't, you know, let's just be real. You know, Black people, a lot of times, we're not taught the game of money in this country. We taught to work hard for somebody else. We taught to go to school and learn and then go get a job. We're not talking about like working hard has never made anybody, well, I don't want to say never, but working hard, like as a laborer, working for somebody else, is going to take you a hell of a lot longer time to get to that wealth building that you want to build. But in terms of, you know, doing wealth building strategies, like you saying, going in, you know, with somebody else and buying some property or things like that, you know, those things, and even the market. I mean, they've been in the news, as you know, the last couple of weeks with the Reddit folks against the big hedge funds. Yeah. And let's be clear, it's not about being rich. At least for me, it isn't. It's not about like trying to, you know, because I'm actually talking about this now. I never really talk about this publicly, you know what I mean, in terms of like kind of strategies, you know, that I'm thinking about now, because I have so many friends who are on the spectrum. I have friends who, you know, are totally against the market, you know, and saying, you know, that's exploitive, it's capitalism, it's all of this and that. And I get it. And I totally understand that. And how I reconcile it for myself is this: it's a tool that's still available. And for me, and for right now, I'm going to use this tool to get to where I need to go, instead of always being in a position where we're constantly begging the government to change laws, constantly begging or like pleading with somebody to do something for us that we can be doing for ourselves. So people can call me whatever they want, but, you know, I know that I love my people. And before I can be out here in these streets and talking about Black liberation, you know, my husband and I know we got to take care of home first and these babies in this house. And so I'm with you 100% on that. I just hate that I got started so late.
No, as long as you get started. I mean, and that's the whole, I don't care what it is. You know, it's one thing not to know. It's okay not to know. It's all right. It's not okay. And it's not all right to continue not to know. All right. And so it's like, all right, just literally, we come into this at different states, at different points. And then even now, okay, I kind of get it, but I don't understand it. And do I really want to trust my money over here? And I'm not really. And so you go through those types of things. Do I have that money that I'm prepared to just, if I lose it, am I all right with it? And so
that's right.
Right. Can you invest in, is there an assurance with it? And there's never an assurance. And,
no, you know, it's not. Definitely.
And so what you start doing, you know, I started looking globally, you know, because again, you're looking at trends, economic trends. And it's like, you know, gentrification isn't just happening in DC or in New York or in that place and that. It's happening in London. It's happening in Amsterdam. It's happening in Berlin. And I started saying, I've been trying to get a news team for the last 4 years. Can I get somebody to travel with me to London and start interviewing people? Because I get the feeling that the same people that are gentrifying here are gentrifying there.
Of course, they're billionaires, yeah.
Exactly. So, but the whole thing is the exact same thing is happening where the bottom is falling out. So nobody is in these expensive buildings that we're building. They're empty. And so eventually,
There's an article out of New York that's saying there's all these million condos that they built on top empty.
Thank you. Right, because again, like I said, God has a way of leveling the field and setting it straight. So it's literally like, yeah, you just put out half these people out their houses, built all this luxury foolishness. You got people paying $5,200 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment across from Kennedy Playground on 7th Street. No way in the world, $5,200. Give me a break. All right, come on. And so it's like, all right, and the people that are in the building have these vouchers. So it's like, I thought vouchers were for people who were really poor. Now you done got in bed with some developers and you giving people who are making $150,000 a year vouchers, right? So that they can be in, right. So you played yourself. So at this point, you know, there's a building down here. This young lady comes in and she says, yeah, I live upstairs. She working in the Starbucks. Well, what you doing upstairs? I can't live upstairs. Not that I would want to, but that's how you living. She said, there are only 3 people in the entire building. The entire building, only 3 people.
They pay fair market rent.
No. The reason why she's there is because nobody was in there, and the developer finally said, okay, I'm just going to let anybody that wants to move in. And she had just moved in maybe the week before. And I said, well, I'm going to ask, how much money are you paying for rent? She said $150 a month.
Get the F out of here.
Right. So then I say the bottom fella.
Wow, because she work at Starbucks and living in prime property. She white, right?
Black, 2-bedroom apartment, and she got a daughter. And I said, right, that's what I'm saying. So it's literally, but you still trying to build something. So here's the thing. Between COVID, the economic regression that happened with that, and then all this foolishness that's been happened up there at the Capitol, people that aren't from here, they're scary. They've already left.
They gone.
They've left. So it's like,
I guess I'm.
Right. So
we
sometimes
think about leaving this area too.
Well, my thing was, if you've left, then we can walk on into this other property and just take it on over, right? And I'm not really bothered by that, but it was a sneaky thing to do. And I think, again, since this is a global issue, it happened in all these places at the exact same time, all right? But again, the point is, if somebody told you, like they did in Harlem 15, 20 years ago, you can have a brownstone for $5. The banks, if you can have them, and we'll give you a loan to rehab it. Around $5. And I got $5. Can you're not a New York resident. And I'm like, God dang it. Is anybody here? Nobody Black wanted to invest in that. Nobody want to be up in Harlem. Nobody wants to be in Harlem. Okay, well, Harlem bounced back, at least temporarily. I'm not sure what's going on up there now, but it's like property. And these are these nice big brownstones.
Nice, yeah, the brownstones, yeah.
Right. So it's just like $5, that's it. Nobody wanted. They did the same thing on 8th Street Northeast here. No, Black people will give you the house.
My husband is a native Washingtonian, and when we moved, for him moving back here several years ago from Ohio, because a lot of people who know me know I lived in Ohio for 20 years before I moved, and he would always tell me, man, you would never see white folks walking their damn dog on 8th Street. He was like, you would never see white folks over here by Howard and all these different areas in Trinidad. White folks live in Trinidad. He was shocked. Trinidad is for people who weren't listening, you're not from DC, that's a neighborhood. Right. And he told me, he was like, man, this is crazy.
Right. And they bold with it. That's what's like,
yeah.
It's 6 o'clock in the morning. You out here.
They be out walking the dog. Yeah.
I'm not out here like that. Not,
right.
Like, I know what this neighborhood used to be. He's like, he's right. You get to a light and you be like, I'm gonna run it because I'm not.
He told me about that. I said it used to be that bad because he grew up here in the 80s. He was like, oh man, this was Ronald Reagan's, pushing that crack in our community. This was right in the backyard.
Right.
I mean, he grew up pretty, I ain't gonna say he grew up rough, but he grew up where he understood the dynamics of the community. Now, like I mentioned, he comes from, what would be considered a decently middle-class Black family. His father was a lawyer. He's retired now. And his mother was taught, like I mentioned, my mother-in-law taught in DC public school. So that's when you seen all the Black folks fleeing DC who could, and they were one of them, to Maryland. Right. My mother-in-law still lives in Prince George's County. So, it's it's a very interesting thing. Before we wrap up, because we done been here 2 hours and we still got folks rocking with us, man. Like they still with us. And just want to appreciate you for giving us 2 hours of your time that I know you normally would charge big bucks, because you are talking about and you are researching things. You actually put me in the mind of Harriet Washington. She's actually going to come on as well.
Okay.
Wanted to share with you when you were talking about informed consent. She's actually dropping a book this month, February, saying the erosion of informed consent. And I'm seeing that with COVID, because now you're starting to see jobs requiring, like, gonna make people, that's not informed consent. You basically tying somebody's income and saying that if you don't take this shot, you're fired.
Your livelihood.
That's your livelihood. The same thing we seeing are happening with schools. Sister Tanette, as a matter of fact, that you and I know, she's in LA. She said the LA Teachers Union said, oh no, ain't nobody coming back to school till the CDC approved the vaccine for children.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You hear me?
Absolutely.
You hear me? This is beyond the tale. And and that's one of the reasons why I am pushing the current Black homeschooling collectives now to scale up, invest in your business and scale. Because we are getting ready to launch a national campaign for Black homeschooling. And we have to do it now and strike while the iron is hot. You actually have white folks pushing their legislators, and it's in the white states like New Hampshire and Georgia's pretty Black, but they got a bill down in Georgia. These are state legislatures that are already pushing bills saying, you know what, you can have an education savings account. We'll give you up to $5,000 a year. That's your education. Because if we still have schools closed, these kids ain't learning no online learning. And I'm speaking as a parent who is who is homeschooling. My husband and I homeschooling our 6-year-old, because online learning is a joke for a 6-year-old. But my middle schooler is doing the online learning, and I'm listening. There ain't no teaching going on for real. Let's just be real. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that it's like that across the board. And here I'm in Montgomery County, right? We're supposed to be one of the best school systems in the country.
You know
what I'm saying? So if one of the best schools in the country can't figure it out to do this thing well, it lets you know that you got to start doing this for yourself. It is our responsibility to educate our children. Our ancestors, you pointed it out earlier, our ancestors knew that.
Right. And again, or people that you trust, people that, so literally, we
love our children, right?
A friend of yours that is good in one subject, and somebody, it's like, all right, and you respect that, and it's like, all right, you teach them this, I'm going to teach them that, and it's again, we were self-taught for the longest time. Just tell me what it is that I need to know.
You know what I do, Dr. Sherman? You know what I do? I remind people. And I think about all the brilliant people that came out of those 2-room schoolhouses. Remember, it ain't been that long ago. A lot of these people still alive.
Nope.
The sister that helped America get to the moon made an entire movie about those 4 Black women. Guess where they were educated? In all Black schools that they claimed, right, didn't have the resources, didn't have this, didn't have that, but was producing some of the most brilliant people this world has ever seen. We can do it again.
And I'm going to do this. I spend part of my time as an editor over at the Washington Informer newspaper. And I'm going to shout them out because I started a literacy campaign initiative for the Washington Informer charities just this past Monday. All right, we kicked it off. But every day, go visit the Washington Informer on social media, the Washington Informer charities. And what you're going to see is it's a whole list of little nuggets, little historical nuggets to tell you. This country was built upon anti-literacy laws for Black people. And it wasn't just against the law for a slave to be taught to read. It was against the law for any Black person, free or enslaved, to read or write. All right. Once slavery was over, it was still illegal. One more time. Once slavery was over, it was still illegal for a Black person to read or write. So a lot of this, don't take for granted. I had this white woman tell me one time, we're in the library and I'm purchasing books. They had a little book sale and I'm picking up stuff. And she said, well, you picking up a lot of books? I said, yeah, home library. And she said, Well, I don't believe in having books that sit on the shelf in my home because, they should be shared. And I said, as an old white woman, that's that's on you. All right. But it wasn't too long ago that I had about as much value to you as this book. So having been challenged, right? We're not even going to do that. There was a time when it was illegal for me to read, and it may come to that again. So look behind me. These are 2 and 3 rows. It's another row behind the books that's sitting here. You understand? These are double and triple row. You will never get to a point where you're not going to have me read. All right. And it was like, when I read, I know you better than you know you.
Come on.
And that's the way we need to do that. She hurry up and put her stuff down and left. And I said, that wasn't to be disrespectful. But how do you get to a point where you tell a Black person don't read, or you malign it like it's something tragic or terrible? You must be crazy.
They don't want us reading.
And they got, come on.
They got strategies to delegitimize us. You mentioned our dear revered ancestor now, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and I was angry. I actually blocked a few people on my social media page because before her body was cold, you had hit pieces from Black people, and I'm gonna say it. Mark Lamont Hill was one of them. You had hit pieces. And there was another brother, I blocked him. I can't remember his name, but a lot of these academics who drug her name through the mud, a black woman medical doctor,
wow.
Right? Who went through all that she went through. And like you said, gave all that she gave for free, like you're doing right now, right? Because she loved her people. That broke my heart. That broke my heart.
You know what? And I think, again, it comes to a point where it's what you're ingesting. So when you get somebody that says this woman has the potential to be a martyr to people who didn't know her, because it's almost like the autobiography of Malcolm X. I always tell people there's certain things you read, and once all you know is life before you read it and then life after, because it hits you. It hits something. Her work is like that. And I kept saying, people, well, did she ever write another book? She didn't need to write another book. That one right there, I will always go back and refer to it. And I also know that when I tried to use that book in college, they
shut you down.
Well,
they shut you down.
Instead of using this, maybe you could use this.
We had a nonprofit organization. Yeah. Let me tell you this story. And this is how you know the information had to be powerful. My husband put together a culturally relevant curriculum toolkit, and we had a list of book recommendations. One of them was the ISIS papers.
All right.
We had a white-led NGO say, well, we can't include this one. It may hurt some people's feelings and these kind of things like that. And we were like, no, this is our intellectual property. This is not the understanding that we had. And, if you want to, you can put up a different version, but it's saying in the original version, everybody is going to know, but we're not kowtowing to white people's hurt feelings and nobody else's who choose to align with them when it comes to our revered ancestor.
That I believe it absolutely. And that's how you know she hit on something. And as a psychologist, again, I don't think a lot of folks understand that it's in the language. So that's why I keep saying, don't keep saying white supremacy. It's white inferiority. It's white insecurity. It's white insecurity. It has nothing to do with them being superior. This is something contrived out of their own minds. So it's like anytime you write a dictionary and make anything that's related to Black or Blackness negative, how does that work? Right. So you basically, you're creating the template and the textbook and the guidebooks and all this other stuff. And then as soon as you have enough people on the planet who don't look like you and who challenge that, then all of a sudden the world is bad and you can't cope and you will tear down democracy, thinking that you can rebuild it again. And it's like, wow. Well, good luck with that. You know what I'm saying? Good luck with that. But it's like, okay, this was never yours in the first place. And that's just right. Because through sheer force and evilness and whatever else you were going through, I always tell people, look, the reason why they were arresting Dr. King is because what he was doing was against the law. That's the bottom line. It was against the law. Now you got to deal with the country that made that illegal. The people who arrested them technically were doing their jobs. All right. So segregation was legal. Anybody
that was the law. Yeah.
Anybody who's trying to integrate anything is breaking the law. So when you make my freedom illegal, I need to talk to you about that. So it's like, that's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, darling. But okay, your hurt feelings on my liberty. Get over yourself. All right. You are not the litmus test on what is right and what is wrong. You don't get to determine what is right and what is wrong. We all in this space together. You still taking my tax money. All right. So
Yeah. We need a redistribution of that tax money because Black people have been double taxed, especially around education, for years. And I think it's time for a redistribution of those education dollars to go directly to families, or to stay in the pocket of the families, so that we can build our own schools, build our own homeschooling collaboratives. There's already all kinds of resources out there that are Black or African centered with regard to K through 12 education. And I already see other people scaling, because we're seeing lots of families, not even just Black families, but homeschooling has gone through the roof.
Yeah. And those
There was a
529
recent
accounts,
article.
yeah, those 529 accounts where like, okay, those 529s were set aside initially for college. But in the last 2 or 3 years, it's like, oh no, if you want to use them to send your kid to a better school or a private school or homeschool, we'll match those dollars and you can take that money and withdraw it out. And it can be for clothes.
Ohio's not doing that yet. I got Ohio 529 plans for both of my children, and I see that they're allowing you to use them at like trade schools and stuff like that now. I think they had to pass a federal law to do that, but now, yeah, you can use them at like trade schools, like if you want to go into a specific trade or something like that, or apprenticeship programs, because a lot of times they'll charge you for that. You can use them for those different things. But I was not aware that you could use the 529 plans for K through 12. I have to call them and find out.
Yeah. I just,
that each state is different. Yeah.
Right. You're saying, and then sometimes they'll set it up specifically through the bank, that FDIC thing. They'll set it up that way, and it may be under a federal plan when they do it that way. But again, the Washington Informer just did a financial literacy supplement about a year ago, and went into PNC branch and was like, explain this to me. And I just brought this was supposed to be for college only. And what's happened? And the guy basically said, you had enough parents, and I read that to mean enough white parents who are invested in this, but realized we want this money now. We want to be able to utilize it now. And based upon them going in, again, my issue is that Black people don't challenge things. We don't need to write any more signs. Don't bring me no cardboard, and I'm not doing all that. We're not doing that. Find your legislator. Find the people who are sponsoring this stuff. Find out where the money is. All right.
That's right.
I mean, we used to be able to shut down whole TV networks. Okay. We pull the advertising on this because we don't like what you said. All right. Now we all over here writing letters and being sad on social media and all this other foolishness. And it's like, look, the bottom line with this country is always what? Money. All right. But we are not the currency anymore. We are not the chattel. And you're not going to play with me like that. All right. So, and our kids are not up, as bargaining tools. These aren't bargaining chips. We're not going to do that. So based on that, it's like, all right, you come up with these lists once again, and you can start with Dr. Wilson. With these lists, what do Black people need to do with and for each other to ensure that we all right? All right. What do we need to do? And some of it is looking out first and foremost for the folks inside your house. All right. Those of you who have kids, affirm those kids every single day. Right? I'm grateful to say, as a 50-year-old woman, I am in the house with my mother, and there's not a day that goes by that I'm not met in the morning with a kiss and a good morning, and I love you, and how did you sleep? And on the way to bed, have a good night, I love you, and Lord willing, I'll see you in the morning. All right. I'm being affirmed. All right. My personhood is intact. And so, unfortunately, what we're seeing a lot of, especially through social media, especially through these daggone TV waves, are young people and middle-aged people at this point who don't know who they are at all. They're operating using pop culture people. I won't even get into WAP and all that foolishness. That's for another session, but just I lost your sound.
Oh yeah, I had it on mute. I'm sorry. I said no. Yeah, I definitely. We definitely gonna have to unpack that one and unpack a lot of the things. Maybe we'll just make sure it's specifically focused on popular culture.
So we went off.
Yeah, no, this was powerful. I don't believe in coincidences. What happened tonight was supposed to happen tonight. That's what was on my heart. That's what was on your heart. And I believe you shared the right information. And like I said, you always have space on this platform. Anytime, you know, you got a new book coming out or you want to promote a new class, come right on in. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up, please tell people where they can find you. I do have your website and everything in the description, but make sure you promote your book again if you want to show it to everybody, and we'll go ahead and wrap up.
All right. So the book again is In Search of Purity. And this looks specifically at the presence of African Americans in the eugenics movement as active participants, and not the subjects of, but literally folks who intellectually said this is something that we embrace. And so we need to understand that as we move forward. You can find me at theacumengroup.org, and it's spelled out theacumengroup.org. The website has little blogs and tidbits. I deal specifically with students. Everything is filtered through students. Acumen Magazine, the PDF digital format is on there as well, so you can see some of what we do, and they have a blog that's on there. The goal is always to ensure that if you have questions about, is this eugenic? We take your emails, you know, so send us questions, you know, ask those questions. The goal is to make sure that you understand the world around you, and that you're not just kind of inadvertently, you know, coasting through some of these eugenic things, and actively engaging in this stuff where it's to the detriment of you and your people, and you don't really get it. You know, it's a learning experience. You know, you're never too old to learn. You're never too young to learn. There are no stupid questions. Make sure if you go to the Acumen Group page, we have sessions that we're doing regularly. I stopped doing this weekly, but for the month of February, the 11th, the 18th, and the 24th, is that right? It's Sundays. Each one of those Sundays, what we're going to do is break down some of these topics. We're going to talk about tropes of Black masculinity. We're going to talk about like Django Unchained, and why that movie has certain scenes that hit at you directly, because they dealt with a Black man showing masculinity and quote unquote saving the day. All right. And how Black men aren't supposed to be heroes. There's legislation that talks about Black men being innately cowardice. And so this is in the military records, and on all of these other things, signed off by Hoover and Roosevelt and all these other people. So we'll look at the facts and the laws and all of that. Also looking at Black women and things about breeding. So we'll look at Claudine and some other films where we're talking directly and specifically about Black women and their bodies, and how they're still considered to be hypersexual. I'm not a particular fan of Pam Grier's, but we'll get into that. But it's like people call her the greatest actress in the world. And it's like, aside from flashing her boobies, I didn't think the sister could act. You know, there's a few things she did. I thought, okay, that was marginally okay. But it's like, she's an icon. And so we started talking about that Jezebel syndrome and the breaking down of sexualization, so that even as you have Michelle Obama in the White House when she was there, you had just a whole barrage of very derogative, nasty.
Yep, I remember. It was a white cartoonist made her look like a monkey one time.
Exactly. Or they had a picture of her going up some stairs with two other presidents' wives, and it was like, it's like a Ferrari and a Maserati and then a big broken down Chevy, you know, talking about their backsides and all this other stuff. So those are the types of things that we'll look at. And then also for the final one, Stereotypes Are Us deals with children. And for that, we're looking at things like the Boy Scouts of America used to have a leaflet. And if you go on the Facebook page, you may see it under the Acumen Group, where they had these little Black kids who had to stick their heads through like these holes. It was a carnival game, and the white kids would throw balls. They had to dodge baseballs. And so knocked out the Black kids' teeth, gave them concussions, all of this, but it was part of a carnival game. And it was called the Dodger. The Dodger game that started in the 1830s, 1840s is the name that the Dodgers, the baseball team, used later. Okay. And the game itself became so popular that it became a household game and all that. Also the African Dipper, which we would today call the dunking booth. They would find little black kids, make them sit in this booth, and the white folks would get drunk and throw the ball to try and dunk the African into the dip. So it's like, all right, these are certain things that we look at. Childhood games, which are still part of pop culture, cartoons, early advertising, and how it becomes almost something that's salacious and sometimes erotic to beat up, defile, maim, or harm Black children. And so some of you have seen Alligator Bait. It's that thing, children being harmed in some type of way. And there's it's a sexualized space for it. Dr. Stacey Patton, who's amazing, she deals with this in some of her writings. And it's just one of those things where even the sport of boxing and wrestling, Django Unchained deals with this, where the two men are wrestling. And they show it in the film, but in reality, what they would do is have these two men wrestling, but they'd be completely naked. And it's a fight to the death. So you have these men sweating and heaving and trying to, fight with each other, and they're tussling. But it was a sexual thing for the white men that would be sitting in the room watching it. All right. Boxing and wrestling come out of that very sexualized space that was taking place on plantations decades before. And so it's things like that we look at. Even now, I can't watch boxing. I won't watch wrestling, all right? Because it's rare that you'll find a white body there. But you have some scantily clad, little panty-wearing men out there beating the hell out of each other. And it's usually a room full of men there just watching this and really getting excited about people punching each other in the face. Okay, it's like, this is weird. Somewhere you have some woman in a bikini show up to walk through the room. Again, the violence and the sexuality are pulled together. So another great
book. You shit. Yeah, I gotta sign up for this class.
The other book,
you putting stuff together that I never connected. Like, I never knew that the history of boxing and wrestling was on the fucking plantation with black men being naked to kill the other one.
The book,
these are some serious devils.
The Delectable Negro is one of my go-to books. I don't think I see it back here on the shelf, but it deals with homoeroticism on plantations, and how
Dr. Tommy Curry talks about that in his work.
Right,
homoeroticism.
Yep. And so literally, things that deal with your senses. So I'm going to deny you the ability to eat. So you're as a slave, you're an enslaved person, and you're almost starving. But part of your punishment will be that one guy, they hung him over a pit where they were roasting a pig. All right. But they had him underneath the pig. So as the grease, as the pig is cooking, the grease that's dropping on him and he's naked. All right. So it's like, okay, this is barbaric. And you understand that even as this meat is cooking, he's starving. He can't reach it. Okay. So it's something extremely sadistic about this type of stuff. And again, this thing of always having people naked. So little black boys didn't get pants a lot of times. They weren't issued pants on plantations until they were 12. So you can imagine them walking around basically with a shirt on and their genitalia is out. Okay. So there's a whole history of things that are kind of pulled into this, where again, you start seeing things on social media of half-clad black men. And the first thing you say is, who is this supposed to be turning on? You don't want to see your husband or your son like this publicly. So this isn't for our viewing. Who's watching this and to what end? Right?
Deep. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again,
and we the one that's savages.
Oh, it's never been about us. It's always a projection. It's always a projection.
Wow.
It's always a projection. So whatever it is that you're saying about me is really your inner thoughts about what it is that you're doing. It's really about what it is that you're doing. So in order for us to break this stuff apart, and like I said, you can never get this, completely in one session. And this used to be an entire course, that went on, weeks, months at a time, because it's that deliberate. And we would break it down into, we're going to do just housing right now. We can do eugenics and housing, and that's it. Redlining, public housing, trailer parks, getting loans, black women as heads of household. All of these things factor in eugenically. Absolutely. Okay. You can do it, school. You can do it with testing. You can do it with the Black family. You can do just women. You can do older women. You can do, so you literally can break this apart in so many other ways, but it requires people to commit to actually learning the information. All right. And so I'm as patient as I can be as far as getting folks and making sure that they get the information. But it's like, I really, really want people to commit to learning, because white people know what they know. And they know at this point a bit more about us than we're aware of. And so we're constantly being netted. We're constantly being pushed into holes that we really, really could have avoided. And it's not necessarily our fault to the people are after us in some instances, but it is our fault that we're just, like I said, skipping through it. We got to get it together. We got to get it together.
Well, I really hope, that our listeners have enjoyed this as much as I have. Like I said, you always have a permanent spot to come back anytime you wish. And this has just blessed me. I mean, this is, even when I came to your presentation in person, and this was a couple of years ago, actually might have been the first year I actually moved here. But I remember Jeff just spoke so highly of you. He said, you have to come. And I remember I registered and paid and came on to that class. And I remember just you dropping some jewels in there. Like, man, I've never heard of any of this stuff. Like, and think about it, like, I got a lot of friends who are educators, PhDs, EDDs, Psych Ds, all these Ds, and they don't even talk about this stuff. And I'm just like, you're a blessing, sister. So we have really outdone ourselves. The chat has been, as you can see, the chat has been live, and we've had people rocking with us the entire time. And thank you all so much. And thank you, Dr. Sherman, for sharing of yourself freely, because you love your people. And the same for me. I've sit here 2.5, almost 3 hours. It's because I love us. And like I said, I created this channel, honestly, Dr. Sherman, because I was just so frustrated with what was currently out there, because I'm like, okay, I see YouTube videos that get all of these views, and I look at it, I'm like, this is trash. Like, what is this? Foolishness. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, I don't care about the views. The right people who want to hear this, they'll be here, and they have, you know what I mean? So it's not about money for me. It's not about, views and being liked or trying to be somebody. All I'm trying to be is of service to my people.
That's it.
That's what it's about. That's what I'm using this platform for. If anybody go back and look at any of my videos, it's always 9 times out of 10 some shit you ain't never heard. Straight up. And it's fact-based. We're not doing conspiracies.
Nope.
Everything that you share, everything that any of my guests share is rooted in actual facts. Now, the fact that you don't ever pick up a book and read, don't make me a conspiracy theorist. I just want to be really clear.
True that.
That's what I'm saying. Look at that bookshelf behind the sister. Ours is downstairs, and I'm not downstairs. Okay. My husband called our all of our books the family library.
All right.
And, he's the show enough reader. Every time I look, he got a new box coming from Amazon with a book. I said, if you don't stop giving Jeff Bezos all our money and go down to Sankofa. And so he did. He actually did. Okay. We started, as you know, Sankofa in DC. It's a Black-owned bookstore. And so we even pay extra if we have to, even if the book might sell a little bit cheaper on Amazon. And he downstairs narrating Everybody's Place in Baltimore. Shout out to Everybody's Place.
Right.
He want to make sure I give out all his bookstores. But anyway, sister, thank you so much. So much love. Thanks everybody for rocking with us tonight. Be sure to share this video. I know it's long, but we all take trips. We all drive. And if you exercise, you probably got your iPod or whatever it is that you use, your iPhone or something in your ear.
Again.
Listen to this while you exercising, right? Listen to this while you driving. If you're on a long trip, I swear we hardly ever play music in our car anymore. We are always listening to something educational. And my husband will tell you he tired of me because I'm always listening to something about some stocks. I'm serious. Like I'm learning. You know what I mean? It's free information. Much love, sister. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll be back hopefully next Thursday. But stay tuned. But Thursdays at 8 p.m. is our regular time. Thanks for being here. Like, and share the video. Thanks for your comments. Peace.